The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and life. For millennia, the Jedi served as its guardians, interpreting its will and maintaining balance. But the Jedi are gone now, slaughtered by the very clones they commanded, their temples burned, their legacy reduced to whispered legends and imperial propaganda. The Force remains, flowing through the galaxy like an eternal river. But on this day, something else arrived. Something the Force had never touched before. Something it didn't understand. The first sign was the scream. Not audible, not to human ears, but every Force-sensitive being in the Coruscant system felt it. A wrenching, tearing sensation, as if reality itself had been wounded. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine's eyes snapped open from meditation, his withered features twisting with fascination and hunger. Across the galaxy, the few surviving Jedi clutched their heads in agony. On the bridge of the Executor, Darth Vader's breathing apparatus stuttered for a single, telling moment. Then came the light. It streaked across Coruscant's perpetual twilight like a falling star. But wrong, too bright, too golden, trailing not fire, but pure radiance that seemed to push back the shadows of the Ecumenopolis. Speeders swerved, crashing into traffic lanes. Citizens stopped mid-step, shielding their eyes, pointing upward with trembling fingers. Imperial communications. Networks lit up with thousands of reports. Simultaneously, meteor, starship malfunction, rebel attack, supernatural phenomenon. The object, the person, hit the industrial district of Sector 4512 with the force of an orbital bombardment. The impact crater was 300 meters wide. Factories crumbled like sandcastles. Repulsor lift platforms twisted into modern art sculptures of tortured metal. The shockwave shattered Windows 40 stories up and triggered every seismic sensor within 5 kilometers. Emergency klaxons wailed across the sector as firefighting droids rushed toward a blaze that burned with colors that shouldn't exist, gold and white and something between, that hurt to look at directly. At the center of the crater, Robert Reynolds lay motionless. He was on his back, arms spread wide, golden cape torn and smoking. His costume, blue and gold, the colors of hope in another universe, was scorched but intact, the stylized S symbol on his chest still gleaming. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful despite the devastation around him. He looked human. He looked vulnerable. He was neither. Sentry's mind swam through darkness and fragmented memories. The last thing he remembered was fighting, always fighting, against something vast and terrible. The void? No, something else. A cosmic threat that had required every ounce of his power to stop. He'd poured everything into one final attack, tearing at the fabric of reality itself to unmake the danger. And then he'd fallen through. The sensation had been unlike anything in his long catalog of traumas. Not pain. He was beyond pain, but wrongness. Like being translated into a language that had no words for what he was. His atoms had screamed. His consciousness had fragmented further than usual. And now he could feel something pressing against his mind. Not thoughts. Not exactly. More like a field. An ocean of energy that permeated everything. That flowed through and around him. That tried to encompass him but couldn't quite manage it. It was old, vast, and it was aware of him in a way that made his already fractured psyche recoil. Subject located. A mechanical voice crackled nearby. Humanoid. Unknown species. Transmitting coordinates to Imperial Command. Sentry's eyes opened. They glowed with inner light. 2 miniature suns in a human face. Above him, a probe droid hovered, its sensor array whirring as it recorded every detail. For a moment, man and machine regarded each other. Then Sentry sat up, movement smooth and unhurried. And the probe droid's sensors went haywire. Radiation readings, off the scale. Energy signature, unprecedented. Threat assessment, error. Recommended response, error. Biological classification, unknown. Remain stationary. The probe droid commanded, its vocabulator struggling with protocols designed for dealing with criminals and dissidents, not gods. Imperial forces are en route. Resistance will be met with lethal force. Sentry looked at the droid, then passed it to the burning wreckage. The twisted metal, the distant sounds of sirens. His expression was blank, not cruel, not kind, just empty in a way that was somehow worse than either. He stood, rising from the crater like a prophet from a tomb, and the golden light around him intensified. "Where am I?" His voice was soft, almost gentle, but it carried clearly despite the chaos. The probe droid processed the question. "You are in Sector 4512, Industrial District, Coruscant, capital world of the Galactic Empire. Surrender immediately or..." Sentry rose into the air, not with repulsors or jets or any technology the probe droid could identify. He simply ascended, defying gravity as naturally as breathing. The golden aura around him pulsed, and the probe droid's sensors registered another impossible spike in energy. High above the crater, Sentry floated and looked out across Coruscant's endless cityscape. Towers stretched to the sky in every direction, layer upon layer of civilization built over thousands of years. Speeders filled the air in regimented traffic lanes. Massive star destroyers hung in orbit like triangular fortresses. And everywhere, he felt that strange energy field pressing against his consciousness. It whispered to him in a language without words. It showed him possibilities. It tried to categorize him, to understand what he was, and failed utterly because Robert Reynolds was a being of pure paradox, infinite power married to infinite instability, a god who didn't want to be a god, a hero whose shadow was a monster. And in that shadow, something stirred. "Where are we?" A voice whispered in his mind, darker than his own, hungry and cold. "What is this place? I can taste fear here. So much fear, so much delicious." "No," Sentry whispered, pressing hands to his temples. "Not now. Not here. Stay down. Stay down." The void retreated, but not far. Never far. Below, Imperial forces were arriving. Stormtroopers in white armor poured from LAT gunships, establishing a perimeter with practiced efficiency. AT-STs stomped through rubble, their cannons tracking the golden figure in the sky. Officers barked orders, coordinating with orbital command, requesting reinforcements, heavy weapons, anything that might contain or neutralize this unprecedented threat. Sentry looked down at them. These soldiers in their strange armor, these machines of war, this vast militarized civilization, and felt a weary recognition. Different universe. Same story. Someone was always trying to control something. Someone was always afraid. Someone always wanted power. And power was something Robert Reynolds had in terrible abundance. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. A lone officer stepped forward, amplifier in hand. Unidentified being. You are in violation of Imperial airspace and responsible for massive property damage. Descend immediately and submit to Imperial authority, or we will open fire. Sentry tilted his head, studying the officer with eyes that had seen galaxies burn. "I didn't mean to crash here," he said, voice still gentle. "I don't even know where here is. I just want..." The AT-ST fired. The blaster bolt hit Sentry square in the chest. For a fraction of a second, the industrial district fell silent. Stormtroopers held their breath. Officers waited for the smoking corpse to fall. The AT-ST pilot prepared a second shot, finger hovering over the trigger. The bolt dissipated against Sentry's chest like water against a blast door, leaving not even a scorch mark on his costume. Sentry looked down at where the blast had struck, then up at the AT-ST. His expression didn't change, still that terrible, empty calm. He raised one hand. Not threatening, almost curious, and golden light gathered around his fingers. The AT-ST sensor array shrieked warnings as energy readings spiked to levels that shouldn't be possible. Outside a starship reactor, weapons free, the commander screamed. "All units, open fire." The industrial district erupted in a storm of blaster fire. Green and red bolts converged on Sentry from every angle. Heavy repeaters. E-11 rifles, the AT-ST's chin-mounted cannons. The sound was deafening, a continuous thunder of superheated plasma that lit up the twilight. Like a deadly light show. None of it touched him. The bolts simply stopped, frozen in midair around Sentry in a perfect sphere, suspended by some invisible force. He floated there, golden and untouchable, while dozens of blaster bolts hung motionless like flies in amber. his head tilted, studying the phenomenon with detached interest, as if he were observing someone else's power rather than his own. Fascinating, he murmured. The physics here are different. He closed his hand into a fist, and every blaster bolt winked out of existence simultaneously. The stormtroopers stumbled back, training warring with survival instinct. The AT-ST pilot frantically transmitted to command. Target is impervious to standard weapons. Repeat, standard weapons ineffective. Requesting immediate support from orbital batteries or Sentry descended, landing gently in the center of the Imperial formation. Troopers scrambled away, creating an involuntary circle around him. He looked at them, really looked, and saw not threats but soldiers. Scared soldiers in armor, following orders, caught up in something far beyond their comprehension, just like so many he'd encountered before. In his own universe, in his thousands of battles. I don't want to hurt anyone, he said quietly. I just need to understand where I am, what this place is, how I got here. A younger officer, perhaps emboldened by fear or training, stepped forward with stun cuffs. Sir, please extend your hands in. Sentry's eyes flared golden, not with anger, but with the simple effort of existing. The officer's stun cuffs melted into slag, plastic and metal dripping between his fingers. The man yelped, dropping the molten remains, stumbling backward into his comrades. I said I don't want to hurt anyone, Sentry repeated, and there was something in his voice now, an edge, a warning. But you need to understand what you're dealing with. I am Robert Reynolds. Where I come from, they call me Sentry, and I have the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. As if to punctuate the statement, his aura flared brighter, and every unshielded electronic device within 50 meters sparked and died. Comlinks went dead. Targeting systems failed. Even the AT-ST's power core stuttered, forcing an emergency restart. High above Coruscant, in the Imperial Palace throne room, Emperor Palpatine leaned forward on his throne, yellow eyes gleaming with predatory interest. Before him, a holographic projection showed Sentry's landing site, the failed containment attempt, the casual display of power that had neutralized an entire Imperial squad without apparent effort. Magnificent, Palpatine whispered, his voice a dry rasp of ancient malice. Neither Jedi nor Sith, not even Force-sensitive in the traditional sense. Yet such power. His withered fingers drummed against the armrest. Lord Vader, you will investigate this anomaly personally. In the shadows behind the throne, a massive figure stepped forward. Darth Vader's respirator breathed its eternal rhythm. Inhale. Exhale, the sound of a walking tomb. As you wish, my master. Shall I bring him before you? If possible. Palpatine's smile was a death's head grin. If not, eliminate him. We cannot allow such power to exist outside Imperial control. Not when we have worked so hard to extinguish all other threats to our order. Yes, my master. Back in Sector 4512, Sentry was becoming aware of multiple problems simultaneously. The first was the strange energy field heat. Noticed upon waking, it was everywhere, permeating every living thing around him. The stormtroopers had it. The fleeing civilians had it. Even the pilots in the gunships overhead had it. A subtle current of energy that connected them all, that flowed through them like electrical current through a circuit. The second problem was his own power. Something about this universe was interfering with his molecular manipulation abilities. He could feel his other powers, strength, flight, energy projection, functioning normally, even enhanced by the alien star system's radiation. But his reality warping capabilities, his ability to restructure matter at the atomic level, felt muted, as if he were reaching through thick syrup. The third problem was the void. They fear us, the dark voice whispered, stronger now than it had been moments ago. I can feel it, taste it. Their terror is delicious. Let me show them what real fear looks like. Let me. Shut up, Sentry hissed, pressing his palms against his temples. The golden aura around him flickered, darkening at the edges with streaks of shadow. The stormtroopers saw the change. The senior commander, a veteran of countless suppression actions, recognized a deteriorating situation when he saw one. Fall back, he ordered. Establish a 2-kilometer perimeter. No one in or out. And give me a line to ISB headquarters. This is beyond military containment. As the Imperials withdrew, civilian traffic in the surrounding sectors ground to a halt. News feeds lit up across Coruscant. Wild speculation. Grainy footage from drone cameras. Theories ranging from rebel superweapon to alien invasion. The Imperial Security Bureau moved quickly to suppress the most inflammatory reports. But information traveled fast in a city planet of trillions. In a dingy cantina 3 sectors away, a rebel intelligence operative named Cassian Anders studied the leaked footage on a datapad, his expression carefully neutral. "Get me a secure channel to command," he told his Celestin contact. "Tell them we have a situation. Unknown entity, immense power, and the Empire is already mobilizing." "Think it's one of theirs?" the Celestin asked nervously. "No." Cassian watched footage of Sentry shrugging off an AD-ST barrage. "If the Empire had something like this, they wouldn't be scrambling to contain it. Which means it's either a new threat or a new opportunity." Back in the crater, Sentry tried to collect himself. He needed information. Needed to understand where he was, how he'd gotten here, and most importantly, how to get back. If there even was a way back. The dimensional rift that had brought him here had felt permanent, final, like a door slamming shut behind him. He was alone in an alien universe, with godlike power he barely controlled, and a homicidal alter ego that fed on fear and darkness. In his own universe, that had been manageable, barely. Here, where everything felt wrong and reality itself seemed to resist him. He wasn't sure he could maintain the fragile balance that kept the void contained. The air suddenly grew cold. Not physically, the temperature remained constant. But something had changed in that strange energy field. That pervasive presence he couldn't quite identify. It had shifted, coalesced, focused with predatory intensity. Sentry looked up. A shuttle was descending through the smog layer. Black as midnight, its lines angular and aggressive. It bore no markings beyond the Imperial crest, but everything about it screamed authority, power, and death. As it touched down 50 meters away, ramp extending with hydraulic precision, Sentry felt that energy, field spike with an intensity that made his already fragmented mind recoil. A figure emerged from the darkness of the shuttle's interior. 7 feet tall, armored head to toe in black, a cape that flowed like liquid shadow, and a breathing apparatus that filled the air with a sound that would haunt nightmares. The mechanical rhythm of a man who refused to die, who had been broken and rebuilt into something more terrible than death itself. Darth Vader had arrived. The two beings regarded each other across the smoking crater, gold and black, light and shadow, alien god and fallen knight. The Force swirled between them, confused and agitated, trying to make sense of the golden figure that existed outside its understanding. To Vader's Force-enhanced senses, Sentry was a paradox, simultaneously present and absent, visible yet incomprehensible, like staring at a black hole that radiated light instead of consuming it. "You are the source of the disturbance," Vader stated, his voice a mechanical monotone that somehow conveyed absolute authority. It wasn't a question. Sentry studied the armored figure approaching him with measured steps. The strange energy field, that omnipresent current he'd felt since awakening, was concentrated in this being like nowhere else. It flowed through him, around him, was him in ways Sentry's fractured mind struggled to comprehend. But beneath the power, beneath the armor and the mechanical breathing, Sentry's enhanced senses detected something else: pain. Endless, eternal pain. This being was a walking wound that had never healed, had never been allowed to heal. "I didn't mean to crash here," Sentry said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I was fighting something in my universe. Something tore. I fell through. I don't even know where here is." "Here is the Galactic Empire," Vader replied, still advancing with that deliberate, inexorable pace. "Here, all power serves the Emperor or is destroyed. Which will you be, stranger? Servant or corpse?" The void stirred at the threat, pleased. "Corpse? Let's show him what corpses look like. Let me tear that armor off him piece by piece. Let me." Sentry's eyes flashed darker for a moment before he reasserted control. "I'm neither. I'm just trying to understand what happened. This place, this universe, it feels wrong, different, like reality itself. Operates on different rules." Vader stopped 10 meters away, cape settling around him like the wings of some great predatory bird. His breathing filled the space between them. Inhale, exhale. The rhythm of a broken man sustained by machinery and the dark side. You speak of universes as if multiple exist. Interesting. The Jedi spoke of the Force binding our galaxy. Perhaps you come from a place the Force does not reach. The Force? Sentry's brow furrowed. That energy I keep feeling? That field that's everywhere. You sense the Force? For the first time, Vader's voice held a note of something other than mechanical certainty. Interest, perhaps, or concern. Yet you do not wield it. You are not Force-sensitive, yet you perceive it. Another impossibility to add to your collection. Vader extended his hand, and Sentry felt that energy fields suddenly compress around him, trying to grip him, to lift him. The Dark Lord's telekinesis could crush blast doors, could choke men from across star systems. Against Sentry, it was like trying to move a mountain with a gentle breeze. Sentry didn't budge, didn't even sway. He simply stood there, golden aura brightening slightly. And the Force itself seemed to recoil from him like water from oil. They didn't mix, couldn't mix. He existed on a fundamental level that the Force could perceive but not affect. Vader's hand closed into a fist. The telekinetic pressure intensified, enough force to collapse a building. Focused entirely on Sentry, the ground around them cracked. Rubble began to float. But Sentry remained rooted, immovable, an island of stability in a sea of dark side power. Fascinating, Vader said, lowering his hand. You are immune to the Force. In my years serving the Empire, I have encountered Force-nullifying creatures. Isalamery that create bubbles where the Force cannot exist. But you are different. You do not nullify the Force. You simply exist outside it. I don't know what I am anymore, Sentry admitted. And there was genuine pain in his voice. Back home, I was a hero, a protector. But there's something else inside me. Something dark. And this place, your Force, it seems to make it stronger. Vader's respirator breathed its eternal rhythm. Behind the mask, Anakin Skywalker's ruined face contemplated the being before him. He recognized the war between light and dark. It was a war he'd fought and lost decades ago. But this being's internal conflict was different. The darkness within Sentry wasn't a choice, wasn't a philosophy. It was a curse, a passenger, an infection. The dark side grows in the presence of fear and pain, Vader observed. If you carry darkness within you, this galaxy will nurture it. The Empire is built on fear. The Emperor has spent 20 years cultivating, suffering across 1,000 star systems. You have arrived in fertile soil for whatever shadow haunts you. As if in response to Vader's words, the shadows around Sentry deepened. His golden aura flickered, and for just a moment, something else was visible, something tall and terrible, all angles and hunger. A darkness that wore Sentry's shape but twisted, corrupted, wrong. The void smiled with Sentry's face. Vader's hand moved to his lightsaber. The Force screamed a warning, not about Sentry, but about the thing inside him. That darkness was familiar. It tasted like the dark side, but fundamentally different. Not born of passion and power, but of negation and entropy. It was hunger given form, death given consciousness. What is that? Vader demanded. The void, Sentry whispered, fighting for control. My shadow, my curse. In my universe, I'm the most powerful hero. The void is equally powerful, but it only wants to destroy, to consume, to negate everything I try to protect. His voice cracked. I've kept it contained for years. But here it's so much stronger. The shadow receded as Sentry reasserted control, but it was a near thing. Both beings recognized how close the balance had come to tipping. Vader's hand remained on his lightsaber, not activating it, but ready. You are a danger to the Empire, Vader stated flatly. To everything. The Emperor will demand either your submission or your destruction. And which would you prefer? Sentry met Vader's masked gaze with glowing golden eyes. You don't strike me as someone who serves willingly. I can feel your pain, your anger, your regret. Vader's Force presence flared with sudden rage. Dark side energy crackling around him like a storm. The air itself seemed to darken. You know nothing of my service. Nothing of my master's vision for galactic order. I know enough. Sentry's voice was soft but firm. I've seen empires before. Tyrants who promised order through fear. It never works. It only breeds more suffering, more darkness. And if your emperor is as powerful as you suggest, that darkness is going to feed the void until there's nothing left of me to keep it contained. For a long moment, Vader stood silent, his breathing the only sound. The Dark Lord was calculating, weighing options, considering outcomes. Sentry represented an unprecedented variable, immense power, immune to force manipulation, but clearly unstable. The Emperor would want to study him, to weaponize him if possible. But Vader had seen the void, felt its wrongness. If that darkness was unleashed fully. Come with me, Vader finally commanded. The Emperor will decide your fate. And if I refuse? Vader's lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss, crimson blade humming with deadly promise. Then we discover if your invulnerability extends to plasma contained within a magnetic field. I have fought gods and monsters, stranger. You will not be my first. Sentry looked at the lightsaber, a weapon unlike anything in his universe. Elegant and terrible. He could feel the heat from here, sense the unique energy signature. It was technology, but powered by something more. That strange force energy, focused and weaponized, through a crystal that itself carried a resonance of pain and anger. I don't want to fight you, Sentry said. I don't want to fight anyone. I just want. An explosion rocked the industrial district. Both beings turned toward the sound. 3 sectors away, a massive fireball rose into the twilight sky, followed by the distinctive whine of TIE fighters engaging an unseen target. Blaster fire lit up the distance like deadly fireworks. Vader's comlink crackled. Lord Vader, we have a situation. Rebel strike team, attacking the Imperial Armory in Sector 4509 there, using the disturbance in 4512 as cover for the operation. The Dark Lord's respirator breathed its frustration. He looked back at Sentry, weighing priorities. The Golden Being was contained for now, clearly conflicted and unlikely to rampage while wrestling with his internal demons. The rebel attack required immediate response. You will remain here, Vader commanded, pointing at Sentry with his ignited blade. Do not attempt to flee. Do not attempt to interfere with Imperial operations. When I return, we will continue this conversation. And if I do leave? Sentry asked quietly. Vader's response was cold as deep space. Then I will hunt you across the galaxy. And our next meeting will not involve conversation. The Dark Lord deactivated his lightsaber and turned, cape swirling, already issuing orders to the stormtrooper squads converging on the rebel attack. Within seconds, he was aboard his shuttle, lifting off toward the new crisis, leaving Sentry alone in the crater with his thoughts and his demons. He left us, the void whispered. That was a mistake. We could follow him, watch him fight, maybe join in. There's fear in that direction. So much fear. No, Sentry said firmly. But he looked toward the distant explosions, toward the sounds of battle. And something in him, the hero he'd been, the protector he'd tried to remain, stirred uncomfortably. People were dying over there. The void wanted to feed on their fear. But Sentry wanted to help. The question was, in this strange galaxy, with his powers compromised and his control slipping, would helping only make things worse? Sentry stood at the edge of the crater, torn between instincts that had defined him for years, and the terrifying knowledge that those instincts might now be liabilities. In his universe, when he heard explosions and screams, the choice was simple: fly toward the danger, stop the threat, save lives. But here, in this alien galaxy where reality bent around, strange rules and his own darkness fed on, ambient suffering, simple choices became complex moral calculus. The distant battle intensified. More explosions, the scream of starfighter engines, the unmistakable sound of collapsing infrastructure. And underneath it all, carried on that strange force energy that permeated everything. Sentry felt something he'd become intimately familiar with over his long, bloody career: terror. People were afraid, dying, being crushed in crossfire between forces they probably didn't even understand. Yes, the void purred, stronger now, feeding on the ambient fear. Feel that? That's the taste of civilizations at war. This galaxy is drowning in fear, Robert. The Empire rules through terror. These rebels spread chaos. And we could drink deeply from the well. They're fighting for freedom, Sentry argued with himself, hands clenching into fists. The rebels are fighting against tyranny. Are they? Or are they prolonging suffering? The Empire offers order, stability, peace through strength. The rebels offer hope, the cruelest lie of all. Hope that leads to more death, more destruction, more delicious fear. Sentry's golden aura flickered between gold and shadow-streaked darkness. His fractured psyche, already compromised by years of internal warfare, was deteriorating faster in this universe. The Force wasn't causing it directly, but its presence amplified everything he felt. Every emotion was sharper here, every internal conflict more pronounced. A civilian transport, caught in the crossfire, spiraled out of control, engines smoking. It was heading straight for a residential tower, loaded with families who had no part in the galaxy's endless conflicts. Sentry moved without conscious thought. One moment he was standing in the crater. The next, he was 3 sectors away, moving faster than the human eye could track, not quite light speed, but close enough that the sonic boom of his passage shattered windows and triggered vehicle alarms across 5 city blocks. He caught the transport one-handed, his other hand extended to arrest his momentum against the residential tower's side. The ferrocrete cracked under his palm, but held. The transport, a bulky civilian model designed to carry 50 passengers, dangled from his grip like a toy. Inside, faces pressed against viewports, mouths open in shock, terror transforming to disbelief as they registered their impossible savior. Sentry set the transport down gently on a landing platform, then was gone again before grateful passengers could even unbuckle their restraints. The battlefield came into focus as he approached. Vader was there, lightsaber carving through rebel positions with mechanical efficiency. Stormtroopers advanced behind portable shield generators while TIE fighters strafed defensive positions. The rebels, a mixed group of humans, aliens, and a few desperate idealists, were holding an Imperial armory, trying to download weapons manifests before extracting. They were losing. Sentry hovered above the chaos, taking it in. This wasn't like the clear-cut battles of his universe. There were no obvious villains here, or rather, there were villains on both sides. The Empire was authoritarian, oppressive, built on fear and control. But the rebels were detonating explosives in populated sectors, endangering civilians to strike military targets. Both sides claimed moral authority. Both sides were killing people who probably just wanted to live their lives. A rebel fighter, a young Twi'lek woman, couldn't be more than 20, took a blaster bolt to the chest. She fell, clutching the wound, her fear and pain rippling through the Force like a stone dropped in still water. The void lunged for that fear, feeding, growing stronger. Sentry descended into the battle before he could second-guess himself. He landed between Imperial and Rebel lines, golden light blazing bright enough to cast sharp shadows in every direction. Both sides froze, weapons still raised, fingers on triggers, everyone trying to process what they were seeing. The golden stranger from Sector 4512, the being who'd shrugged off an ADST barrage, standing in the middle of a firefight like a judge at the end of days. "Stop," Sentry said simply. A nervous stormtrooper fired. The bolt evaporated against Sentry's chest. Vader's voice cut through the confusion like a vibroblade. "Hold fire. All units, hold fire." The Dark Lord strode through his troops, lightsaber still ignited, cape dragging through debris and blood. His masked face turned toward Sentry, and though no expression was visible, his Force presence radiated cold fury. "I commanded you to remain at the crash site." "People were dying," Sentry replied, meeting Vader's gaze steadily. "I'm a lot of things, but I'm not someone who stands by while innocents suffer." "Innocents?" Vader gestured toward the rebel position with his crimson blade. "These terrorists attacked an Imperial facility, stole weapons, killed loyal soldiers. There are no innocents here, only traitors, and those who enforce the Emperor's justice." From behind hastily erected barricades, a rebel lieutenant, a grizzled human with a cybernetic eye, shouted back, "We're fighting for freedom, for a galaxy that doesn't crush its citizens under the boot of tyranny." "You're fighting for chaos," Vader countered, his voice carrying across the battlefield with supernatural clarity. "The republic you claim to restore was corrupt, inefficient, paralyzed by bureaucracy. The Empire brought order, peace, stability. Through fear and genocide, the rebels spat. Alderaan, the Jedi purge, Wookiee enslavement. You call that peace?" Sentry looked between them, tyrant and freedom fighter, oppressor and terrorist, depending on perspective. In his universe, the lines had usually been clearer. Supervillains threatened innocence. Heroes stopped them. But here, in this galaxy's endless cycle of violence, where exactly did the line between hero and villain fall? Both of you. Stop shooting, Sentry said, his voice carrying power now. Authority born of sheer presence rather than position. Just stop. For 5 minutes. Talk. There has to be a better way then. The building behind the rebel position exploded. Not from Imperial fire. From charges the rebels had set as a fallback position. The armory was self-destructing, preventing Imperial forces from securing the stolen data. But the blast was larger than intended. Amateur demolitions work. Or faulty charges. Or just the cruel randomness of warfare. The explosion tore through 3 levels. And the ferrocrete structure began to collapse. Directly toward a field hospital where wounded civilians from earlier attacks were being treated. Sentry didn't think, didn't debate, didn't let the void argue about the philosophical implications of who deserved saving. He simply moved. The speed was impossible, faster than thought, faster than light could travel the distance. Physics bending around him because Robert Reynolds existed partially outside conventional reality. He reached the collapsing building and held it. 5,000 tons of ferrocrete, durasteel, and broken infrastructure, falling with the full force of gravity and explosive momentum. It hit Sentry's upraised hands like a mountain dropped from orbit. His feet sank into the permacrete. Cracks spiderwebbed out from where he stood, spreading 50 meters in every direction. His golden aura blazed brighter than Coruscant's sun, bright enough that unshielded eyes had to look away. Every muscle in his body, muscles that could bench press, planets strained against the weight. And he held it. The building stopped falling, hung there, suspended by one man's will and power, defying every law of physics that should have applied. Dust rained down around him. Rebar dangled from broken edges. But the structure held because Sentry held it. Get them out, he shouted through gritted teeth. Get the patients out now. Both Imperial and Rebel forces stared in shock. Then training overrode wonder. Stormtroopers rushed into the field hospital, grabbing stretchers, carrying wounded civilians and soldiers alike. Rebel fighters, their ideological enemies, joined them without hesitation, because saving lives transcended politics when a god was. Holding a building above their heads, Vader watched from the battlefield, lightsaber lowered, his force senses fully open. What he felt from Sentry was extraordinary, not force power, but raw physical might channeled through a being whose very existence defied natural law. The strain was immense. Sentry was holding the building, yes, but it was costing him. Not physically, Vader doubted. This being had physical limits in the conventional sense, but mentally. The cracks in his psyche were widening. The darkness within him was feeding on the fear and pain radiating from the field hospital. And that darkness was starting to leak out. Shadows gathered around Sentry's feet, deeper than the building's shade should allow. His golden aura flickered, and for brief moments, something else showed through. Something angular and hungry that wore his shape but inverted. A negative image of the golden god. Let it fall, the void whispered, now strong enough that others nearby could almost hear it. A subliminal pressure on their minds. Let them see what happens when hope fails. Let them feel what it's like when salvation becomes damnation. No, Sentry growled, but his voice was doubled now, overlapping with something darker and colder. The last civilian was carried clear. Medical droids followed, servos whining as they navigated rubble. A rebel medic, an elderly Gran who'd been treating patients on both sides, was the final one out. She looked up at Sentry, at the being holding impossibility above his head, and whispered something in her native language. It sounded like a prayer. Sentry hurled the building skyward. It rose like a launched starship, spinning slowly, climbing hundreds of meters before gravity finally reasserted dominance. It fell away from the populated sectors, toward the industrial waste processing area where its impact would kill no one. The crash was spectacular, a thunderous impact that registered on seismic sensors across the planet, but empty of casualties. Sentry landed back on the battlefield, breathing hard not from exertion, but from the effort of maintaining control. The void was stronger than ever, gorged on fear and suffering, pressing against the mental barriers that kept it contained. His aura flickered wildly between gold and shadow-streaked black. This galaxy, he said, voice strained, speaking to no one and everyone. This place is going to kill me, or turn me into something worse than death. Vader deactivated his lightsaber, studying Sentry with new calculation. The Emperor wanted this being controlled or eliminated, but perhaps there was a third option. Perhaps such power, properly directed, could serve a greater purpose. Come with me, Vader said again, but his tone was different now. Not a command, but an offer. The Emperor can help you. The dark side of the Force can teach you control, can give you the tools to master your internal darkness. Yes, the Void hissed eagerly. Let them teach us. Let us learn their dark side. Let us grow stronger. Sentry looked at Vader, at the rebels cautiously regrouping, at the Imperials waiting for orders. He thought about the building he'd held, the lives he'd saved, and the darkness that had grown stronger with each act of heroism in this cursed galaxy. I need time, he said finally, to think, to understand this place, to find a way to control this before. The sky tore open, not metaphorically, actually tore, a rift in space-time, similar to but smaller than the one that had brought Sentry here, opened directly above the battlefield, and through it came something that made the Void scream in recognition and hunger. A fragment of Sentry's universe, a piece of the cosmic threat he'd been fighting when he fell through. It was small, barely planet-sized, but it was made of the same reality warping energy that had created Sentry in the first place, the same cosmic radiation that had given him godlike power and cursed him with the Void, and it was falling toward Coruscant. The fragment burned as it fell, trailing reality distortion like a comet's tail. To normal eyes, it appeared as a sphere of impossible colors, hues that didn't exist in the visible spectrum, geometries that hurt to perceive directly. To Vader's Force senses, it registered as a wound in the fabric of existence itself, something that shouldn't be but was, a cosmic aberration that made even the dark side recoil. To Sentry, it was a piece of home, and a death sentence. No, he whispered, then louder. No, no, and no. He launched himself skyward, golden aura blazing as he accelerated toward the falling fragment. Behind him, the battlefield dissolved into chaos. Imperial officers screamed into comm links, calling for planetary shields, orbital bombardment, anything that might stop the object. Rebel forces scattered, abandoning their mission in favor of simple survival. And Vader stood motionless, watching through the Force as forces beyond his understanding collided. Above his head, Sentry reached the fragment at the edge of Coruscant's upper atmosphere. Up close, it was even worse than he'd feared, a concentrated mass of cosmic radiation, the same energy that had transformed Robert Reynolds from an addict into a god decades ago in another universe. It pulsed with raw creative and destructive potential, warping space around it, creating miniature singularities that winked in and out of existence. If it hit Coruscant, it would do more than destroy the planet. It would unmake it, retroactively erasing it from existence, creating a hole in reality that would spread like cancer through the galaxy. Sentry grabbed the fragment with both hands. Pain exploded through him, not physical, but ontological. His atoms screamed as they were flooded with energy signature they recognized, that they had been born from. The fragment tried to incorporate him, to reabsorb him into its mass, to return him to the primordial state of pure potential. And for a terrible moment, Sentry felt himself starting to dissolve. Then the Void seized control. Mine, it roared, a voice that echoed across dimensions. Where Sentry tried to contain the fragment gently, the Void attacked it with savage hunger. Shadow-black tendrils erupted from Sentry's form, piercing the cosmic mass, drinking its energy like a vampire draining blood. The fragment shrieked, if something without consciousness could shriek, as the Void fed. The impossible colors dimmed, the reality distortions weakened, but the cost was devastating. Every iota of power the Void consumed made it stronger, more substantial, more real. The balance between Sentry and his dark half, already precarious, was tipping catastrophically. Stop, Sentry gasped, trying to reassert control. You'll destroy everything. We have to redirect it, not consume it, not. Why? Why protect this galaxy? These people know nothing but war and suffering. Let me feast on their cosmic radiation. Let me grow strong enough that you can never contain me again. Let me live. The battle within Sentry's mind was visible from the ground. His aura strobed between brilliant gold and abyssal black, creating a light show that painted Coruscant's sky in apocalyptic colors. The fragment was shrinking, being drained, but its energy was fueling something potentially worse. In the Imperial Palace, alarms screamed across every system. Palpatine rose from his throne, yellow eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and fascination. He reached out through the Force, trying to grasp what was happening, and recoiled as if burned. Whatever conflict was occurring above his capital, it existed on a level far beyond even his considerable power. Lord Vader, he transmitted through secure channels. What is happening? Vader's response was delayed. The Dark Lord was using every iota of his Force abilities to simply perceive the battle. The stranger, he is fighting himself, Master, and losing. If his darkness wins, I do not believe our empire will survive what emerges. Then you must intervene. Use the Force to tip the balance toward his light. Master, the Force cannot touch him. He exists outside. Not him, apprentice. The Force binds all living things. Perhaps it cannot affect the stranger directly, but it can affect the battlefield around him. Show him that balance is possible. Show him that light and dark can coexist. Give him a reason to keep fighting. Vader understood. His master was not offering wisdom from compassion, but from calculated self-interest. If Sentry's darkness consumed him fully, the resulting entity might threaten even Palpatine's plans for galactic dominance. Better to have a conflicted god than an ascendant demon. The Dark Lord gathered his power and reached upward. Vader's strength in the Force was immense, second only to the Emperor himself, and that only because Mustafar's flames had crippled his potential. He drew on years of pain, rage, loss, and dark purpose. The Force coalesced around him like a cyclone of invisible power, and he hurled it skyward not as an attack, but as a message. Balance, control, purpose. The Force couldn't touch Sentry directly, but it could touch the space around him. It created a field of pressure, of intention, of directed will that pushed against the chaos of his internal war. It was like shouting encouragement across a chasm. The words might not reach, but the effort, the acknowledgement, the presence mattered. Sentry felt it. In his fragmented psyche, drowning in cosmic radiation and the void's hunger, he felt another consciousness reaching toward him. Not attacking, not controlling, simply present, offering an anchor, a reminder that he was not alone, that even in an alien universe, there were those who understood the war between light and darkness because they fought it themselves every day. It wasn't enough to stop the void, but it was enough to remember who Robert Reynolds had been, who he'd fought to remain. I am Sentry, he growled, golden light blazing brighter. I have stood against gods and demons. I have saved worlds and sacrificed everything for the innocent. And I will not let you win. Not here. Not ever. The void thrashed, trying to maintain its grip on the cosmic fragment. But Sentry's renewed will disrupted its feeding. The balance shifted again, not fully back to Sentry's control, but to a precarious equilibrium. The fragment, drained of most of its energy, had shrunk to the size of a fighter craft. Sentry made a decision. He couldn't destroy it. The resulting explosion would still devastate Coruscant. He couldn't contain it indefinitely. His control was too compromised. But he could remove it from this galaxy, send it somewhere it couldn't harm anyone. He wrapped both arms around the fragment and flew. Not up into space, not down to some remote planet, but sideways, perpendicular to conventional dimensions, pushing into the spaces between realities. It was an ability he'd used rarely, even in his own universe. Dimensional travel was dangerous, potentially fatal. Here, where the laws of physics were subtly different, it was agony. Reality resisted him. The Force, which permeated this universe at fundamental levels, tried to prevent the dimensional breach. Sentry's atoms were torn between three states of existence simultaneously. The void screamed, terrified of non-existence in a way it feared nothing else. And then they were through. The dimensional void was a place without place. A non-space between universes where conventional existence broke down. Sentry released the fragment here, letting it drift away into the infinite nothing, where it could harm no one from any reality. Then he clawed his way back toward the Star Wars galaxy, following the Force's pervasive signature like a beacon. The return was harder than the departure. The dimensional walls had scarred where he'd torn through them, making re-entry treacherous. For a moment, an eternal, terrifying moment, Sentry was lost, trapped between universes, unable to find his way forward or back. Then he felt it again. That Force presence. Vader, standing on Coruscant like a dark lighthouse, his power radiating through dimensions to guide the lost god home. Sentry burst back into normal space 300 meters above the battlefield. He hit the ground hard enough to create a new crater, his costume smoking, his golden aura flickering like a dying star. Every molecule in his body felt wrong, scrambled, out of phase with reality. The void was temporarily dormant, exhausted from its feeding and the dimensional journey he had maybe minutes before. It woke up stronger than ever. Vader approached the new crater, lightsaber still deactivated but ready. Around him, Imperial forces maintained perimeter, though many stormtroopers had removed their helmets to stare openly at what they'd just witnessed. The rebels had used the distraction to withdraw, but many still watched from a distance, unable to look away. "You saved Coruscant," Vader stated. "Billions of lives. Even my master's throne. Didn't have a choice," Sentry rasped, slowly climbing to his feet. His costume was torn now, exposing skin that glowed faintly gold even in distress. "That fragment, it was from my universe. My responsibility. My fault it followed me here." "It followed you." Vader's helmet tilted slightly. "Or was it drawn to you?" Sentry looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "The Force showed me something while you fought in the sky. That fragment, it was not pursuing you maliciously. It was attracted to you, as like calls to like. You are this universe's largest concentration of that cosmic energy. The fragment was simply trying to reunite with its source." The implications were staggering and terrible. "You're saying more will come? That the rift I fell through is still open somewhere, and fragments of that cosmic battle are going to keep falling into this galaxy, all drawn to me?" "Precisely." Vader's respirator breathed its mechanical rhythm. "You are a beacon for forces that could destroy this galaxy. The Emperor will not permit such a threat to exist freely." "Then what do you suggest?" Sentry spread his arms, golden light still flickering weakly around him. "Execution? Imprisonment? Conversion into some kind of Imperial weapon?" "The Emperor will offer you a place," Vader said. "Power, purpose, training in the dark side to master your internal demons. He will promise you control in exchange for service. And if I refuse, then he will mobilize every resource the Empire possesses to eliminate you. Orbital bombardment, fleet actions, superweapons. He will burn star systems if necessary to end the threat you represent." Sentry laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "Superweapons. Of course this galaxy has superweapons. Why wouldn't it?" "The Death Star," Vader confirmed. "A battle station capable of destroying planets. Currently orbiting Scarif for shakedown operations. It could be here within days. A planet killer." Sentry shook his head in weary recognition. "My universe had those too. And they always made things worse." He looked directly at Vader's masked face. "You're telling me this as a warning?" "What?" Vader was silent for a long moment, his breathing the only sound in the crater. Finally, he spoke, and his voice carried something that might have been the ghost of Anakin Skywalker's regret. "Because I was once like you, powerful, conflicted, pulled between light and dark. I chose darkness, believing it would give me strength to protect what I loved. I was wrong. The dark side takes everything and gives only power in return. But you did not choose your darkness. You are not ruled by passion or ambition. You are simply cursed." "That's a pretty accurate summary of my life," Sentry admitted. "Then perhaps there is another way. Not service to the Empire, not as the Emperor's weapon, but as something else entirely." "What?" Vader's hand moved to his lightsaber, but not threateningly, almost contemplatively. "A balance. A being who stands between the Empire and its enemies. Who prevents cosmic threats like that fragment from destroying everything. Who exists outside our conflicts, but prevents them from escalating to galactic destruction." "You want me to be a neutral party," Sentry said slowly. "Switzerland with the power of 1,000,000 suns." "I want you to survive," Vader corrected. "Because if you fall to your darkness fully, if the void consumes you, I do not believe anything in this galaxy can stop what you will become. Not the Emperor, not the Death Star, not the Force itself." It was the closest thing to genuine concern Sentry had heard. from the Dark Lord, and it terrified him. Because if someone as powerful as Vader was afraid of the void, I need help, Sentry admitted, the words painful to speak. Real help, not training in the dark side, that'll only feed the void. I need to understand this force. How to exist in this universe without my darkness growing stronger. And I need. A new presence entered the crater. Not Imperial, not Rebel, something else entirely. The figure wore robes that seemed to shimmer between visibility and transparency, a hood obscuring their features. They moved with purpose, but without aggression. And the force around them was strange. Neither light nor dark, but something in between. Something that reminded Sentry uncomfortably of his own internal balance. Robert Reynolds, the figure said, voice neither male nor female, ancient yet ageless. We have been waiting for you. The Force showed us your coming weeks ago. A convergence of impossibilities. A test of balance. Vader's lightsaber ignited instantly, blade humming between the newcomer and Sentry. Identify yourself. How did you penetrate the Imperial perimeter? The figure ignored Vader, focusing entirely on Sentry. We are the Grey Walkers, those who walk between light and dark, who serve the Force's balance rather than its extremes. We can teach you what the Jedi could not, what the Sith will not. We can show you how to exist at the edge of darkness without falling. Sentry looked between Vader and the Grey Walker, then up at Coruscant's polluted sky where stars were beginning to appear in the twilight. In his own universe, he'd had the Avengers, S.H.I.E.L.D., people he trusted to help him maintain control. Here, he was alone, compromised, and being courted by multiple factions, who each wanted to use him for their own purposes. But the Grey Walkers offered something different, something he desperately needed. The void stirred in the depths of his mind, waking slowly, and its first words were a warning. Choose carefully, Robert. This galaxy will define us. Make us gods or monsters. And I'm betting on monsters. Vader's crimson blade hummed between Sentry and the Grey Walker. The Dark Lord's force presence coiled like a serpent ready to strike. I asked you to identify yourself. The Emperor has purged all force cults that refuse Imperial authority. You should not exist. The Grey Walker's hood turned toward Vader, and though no face was visible, Sentry felt amusement radiating from the figure. Should not exist. How many times have those words been spoken today, Lord Vader? Yet here we all stand, the fallen Jedi, the impossible stranger, and those who remember what the Force truly means. Heresy, Vader hissed, his mechanical voice dropping to a dangerous register. The Jedi are extinct. Their philosophy of detachment led to weakness. Only the dark side offers true power. And yet you serve a master, the Grey Walker observed mildly. True power kneels to no one. But we did not come to debate philosophy with Palpatine's apprentice. We came for the beacon. Sentry's eyes narrowed. The beacon? You, Robert Reynolds. You burned so brightly in the Force that every sensitive being in 3 sectors felt your arrival. A star that exists outside our galaxy's natural order. A convergence point where impossible energies collide. The Grey Walker's robes shifted as they gestured. The Force has been disturbed by your presence. Not threatened. Curious. It seeks to understand you as much as you seek to understand it. The Force is not sentient, Vader stated flatly, though Sentry detected uncertainty beneath the absolute declaration. Isn't it? The Grey Walker's question hung in the air. You speak to it, draw upon it, bend it to your will. And sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, it speaks back, shows you visions, guides your hand. The Jedi believed it had a will. The Sith believe it can be dominated. We believe it simply is, and that consciousness is a matter of perspective. Sentry rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building despite his invulnerability. In his universe, he'd dealt with cosmic entities, gods, and reality warpers. But they'd all operated on comprehensible principles, even if those principles involved 11-dimensional mathematics. The Force was different, simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, conscious and unconscious, definable and utterly mysterious. You're saying you can help me, Sentry said to the Grey Walker, choosing to focus on practical matters. Teach me to control the void. Keep it from feeding on this galaxy's darkness. We can show you the path. Walking it must be your own choice. The figure's hood shifted toward Vader. The Empire will not permit this, of course. Lord Vader serves order through tyranny. Our existence threatens that order. You are correct. Vader's blade remained steady, pointed at the Grey Walker's center mass. Leave now, and I will grant you a 10-minute head start before I hunt you. Refuse, and die where you stand. The Grey Walker laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. You cannot kill what has already accepted death. Lord Vader, we who walk the Grey Path understand that life and death are simply states of being, not destinations. But your threat is noted. Sentry stepped between them, positioning himself so that Vader would have to go through him to reach the Grey Walker. Nobody's killing anybody. I've had enough death for one day. Enough fear and pain and suffering. If these Grey Walkers can help me, then I'm listening. They will corrupt you, Vader warned. Fill your mind with false promises. Led you away from true power. True power? Sentry's voice held an edge now, exhaustion and frustration sharpening his words. I have the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. Vader, I can move faster than light, lift planets, restructure matter at the atomic level. In my universe, I've fought gods and won. I don't need more power. I need control. I need to not become the monster that destroys everything I touch. The void stirred at that, pleased by the acknowledgement. But you will become me eventually, Robert. You always do. Every universe we visit, every reality we touch. You try to be the hero, and I emerge as the consequence. Why fight it? Why not embrace what we are? Because I'm not you, Sentry whispered, more to himself than the void. Vader's force senses detected the internal struggle. The way Sentry's aura flickered between gold and shadow. The Dark Lord had spent 20 years mastering his own internal conflicts, burying Anakin Skywalker beneath layers of Durasteel and dark side discipline. He recognized the signs of a mind at war with itself. The Emperor can help you, Vader said, his tone shifting slightly. Not threatening now, but almost empathetic. The dark side offers techniques for controlling inner demons, for channeling rage and fear into purpose. I too struggled with darkness. The Emperor showed me how to make it serve. At what cost? Sentry met Vader's masked gaze. I can feel your pain from here. Whatever control you've gained, it's built on suffering, your own and others. That's not balance. It's just choosing which poison to drink. For a moment, Vader stood absolutely still, his breathing the only movement. Then he deactivated his lightsaber. You are correct. The dark side is poison, but it is poison that grants strength. Weakness dies. Power survives. That is the way of the galaxy. Then your galaxy is broken, Sentry said softly. The Grey Walker made a sound that might have been approval. The beacon sees clearly. Yes, Robert Reynolds, this galaxy is broken. Has been for millennia. The Jedi grew complacent in their light, blind to the shadows they cast. The Sith grew obsessed with power, consuming everything in their hunger. Only those who walk between maintain perspective. Enough philosophy, Vader interjected. The choice is simple, stranger. Come with me to the Emperor. Accept his guidance. Or refuse and be hunted across the galaxy. Or, the Grey Walker added smoothly, come with us. Learn to exist at the threshold. Become something this galaxy has never seen. A being of perfect balance in a universe defined by extremes. Sentry looked between them, the Dark Lord and the Grey Mystic, both offering salvation in different forms. Behind him, Imperial forces waited for orders. Above, orbital sensors tracked his position. Somewhere in the city's depths, Rebel intelligence was doubtless analyzing everything that had happened, calculating how to use it. He was tired, so desperately tired. Fighting the void was a full-time occupation even in his home universe. Here, where every emotion felt amplified, where the ambient fear and suffering fed his darkness like gasoline on flames. The exhaustion was soul-deep, but something the Grey Walker had said resonated. A being of perfect balance. What if that was possible? What if he could stop fighting the void and instead exist in harmony with it, using its power while not being consumed by its hunger? Don't trust them, the void whispered urgently. They want to chain us, control us, make us weak. The Empire at least respects power. These Grey Walkers will try to suppress us both. Before Sentry could respond, his enhanced senses detected movement. Not Imperial forces, they were maintaining position. Something else, coming fast from multiple directions. He looked up and saw them, starfighters. Not TIE fighters, but X-Wings and Y-Wings bearing Rebel Alliance insignia. Incoming, he warned. Vader turned, already reaching out through the Force. The rebels, bold to attack Imperial center directly. The Grey Walker's hood tilted skyward. Not an attack, an extraction. They've been monitoring Imperial communications. They know the stranger represents power that could shift the balance of this war. They intend to claim him first. Sentry's jaw clenched. I'm not a weapon to be claimed. Try explaining that to desperate people fighting a losing war. The Grey Walker said, and now there was genuine sympathy in the voice. The rebellion sees you as hope, a force powerful enough to challenge the Empire's military might. They will not easily accept your refusal. The starfighters screamed overhead, strafing Imperial positions with precision fire. Stormtroopers scattered, returning fire with E-11 rifles. TIE fighters launched from nearby military platforms, moving to intercept. Within seconds, the crater had become a combat zone again. A transport shuttle dropped through the chaos, its ventral thrusters kicking up debris as it set down 30 meters from Sentry. The boarding ramp extended, and a figure emerged, the same rebel lieutenant from earlier. The grizzled human with the cybernetic eye. Mr. Reynolds. He shouted over the sound of blaster fire and screaming engines. My name is Captain Joram Kess. The rebellion needs your help. The galaxy needs your help. Come with us. Please. He goes nowhere, Vader declared, his lightsaber igniting again as he moved toward the rebel shuttle. The Grey Walker simply vanished, not invisibly, but actually disappeared, phasing out of normal space-time. Their final words lingered. Find us when you've decided, Beacon. We will be waiting in the spaces between. Sentry stood at the center of competing forces. Empire, rebellion, mysterious force cult, all wanting to define his role in their conflicts. Above, starfighters dogfought in Coruscant's twilight sky. Around him, soldiers killed each other over ideologies and territory. And inside him, the void laughed at the chaos, feeding on the fear and violence, growing stronger with every death. This is what your heroism brings, Robert. Wherever we go, war follows. Death follows. I follow. Stop trying to save them and let me show them what real power looks like. No, Sentry said aloud, his voice carrying over the battlefield with unnatural clarity. Everyone, stop. He didn't raise his voice, didn't shout, but something in his tone, the authority of a being who'd saved countless worlds and ended threats that made galactic wars look trivial, cut through the chaos. Blaster fire paused. Starfighters broke off attack runs. Even Vader hesitated, crimson blade humming. Sentry rose into the air again, golden aura blazing bright enough to cast sharp shadows despite the twilight. He looked down at them all, Imperial, Rebel, the whole broken galaxy fighting itself into oblivion. I understand what you all want, he said, his voice carrying across kilometers through sheer presence. The Empire wants control. The rebellion wants freedom. Everyone wants to use me as a weapon or a symbol or a solution to problems. I didn't create, but I'm not your savior. I'm not your weapon. I'm barely holding myself together. Then let us help you. Captain Kess called up. The rebellion has resources, safe houses, force-sensitive allies who might understand. You have nothing that can help me, Sentry interrupted. Not cruelly, but with absolute certainty. My problems exist on a level beyond what this galaxy can address. Every act of heroism here feeds my darkness. Every life I save makes the void stronger. Do you understand? I'm a bomb waiting to explode, and you're all trying to light the fuse. Vader's respirator breathed its rhythm. Then what will you do? Sentry looked down at the Dark Lord, at the rebel captain, at the soldiers and pilots, and endless cycle of violence that defined this galaxy. He thought about the Grey Walkers and their promise of balance, about the Emperor and his offers of dark side mastery, about his own desperate need for isolation, for time to think, to understand this universe before making any irreversible choices. I'm going to disappear, he said. Finally, leave Coruscant. Find somewhere isolated where I can't hurt anyone while I figure out how to exist here without destroying everything. If more fragments come through, if there are more cosmic threats from my universe, I'll handle them. But I won't be anyone's soldier. Won't take sides in your war. You cannot remain neutral, Vader stated. The Emperor will not permit it. Then the Emperor is welcome to try stopping me. Sentry's eyes flared brighter. I held a building over my head today, pushed a cosmic fragment into another dimension. I'm trying very hard to be reasonable. Vader, but if you force my hand, you won't like what happens. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact, delivered with the weariness of someone who'd had this conversation 1,000 times across 1,000 conflicts. The void purred approval at the display of strength, but Sentry kept it contained, channeling the darkness into presence rather than violence. Captain Kess took a step forward, hand extended in supplication. Mr. Reynolds, please. You saw what the Empire is. Tyranny. Oppression. They destroyed Alderaan, an entire planet. Billions of innocent lives, just to make a point. We need someone like you. Someone strong enough to stand against them. They destroyed a planet? Sentry's voice went very quiet. Very cold. The Death Star, Vader confirmed. No shame or hesitation in his mechanical tone. A demonstration of imperial power. Alderaan supported the rebellion. They paid the price for treason. Sentry descended slowly, landing in front of Vader. They stood face to face. Gold and black, light and shadow. You destroyed an entire planet. Billions of people, children, families, all gone. And you call it justice? I call it necessity, Vader replied. The strong survive. The weak serve or perish. That is the way of the universe. For a moment, the void surged forward, eager to show Vader what strength really meant, to tear him apart molecule by molecule. But Sentry held it back, barely. His fists clenched so hard that the air around them crackled with released energy. In my universe, Sentry said very softly, I fought alongside heroes. People who believed that strength meant protecting the weak. That power came with responsibility. That no victory was worth the cost of our humanity. His golden eyes bored into Vader's mask. But I've also seen what happens when heroes become monsters. When good intentions pave roads to hell. When power corrupts absolutely. He took a step back, looking at both Empire and Rebellion. You're all monsters here. Different flavors of the same poison. The Empire rules through fear. The Rebellion fights through chaos. Both sides sacrifice innocence and call it necessity. Both sides want me to help them win. But I've learned something in my long, terrible career. When you're asked to choose between two evils, the only moral choice is to reject them both. Then you doom the galaxy to endless war. Captain Kess said desperately. Without intervention, the Empire will crush all resistance. Freedom will die. Hope will die. Maybe, Sentry acknowledged. Or maybe your rebellion will succeed and just replace one tyranny with another. Maybe the cycle will continue forever. Light and dark trading places. Neither side learning anything. He looked up at Coruscant's polluted sky. But that's not my responsibility. I didn't break your galaxy. I won't pretend I can fix it. He launched himself skyward, accelerating so fast that the sonic boom shattered windows across 3 sectors. Within seconds, he was beyond the atmosphere, beyond orbital range, beyond the reach of sensors or weapons. Vader watched him go, then turned to Captain Kess. You and your rebels will pay for this incursion. Wait, Kess said, raising his hands. Temporary truce? We both just lost the stranger. Maybe we should be asking ourselves why someone that powerful wants nothing to do with either of us. Vader's lightsaber hummed dangerously. Then, surprising everyone, he deactivated it. Go, before I change my mind, and tell your alliance that the next time they attack Imperial Center, there will be no mercy. As the rebel shuttle lifted off, Vader stood alone in the crater, reaching out through the Force to sense Sentry's trajectory. The golden being was heading for the outer rim, toward the empty spaces between. Stars were civilizations, were sparse and conflicts distant. My master will not be pleased, Vader said to no one. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine watched holographic reports of Sentry's departure, his withered features twisted in thought. Interesting. The stranger rejects both light and dark, seeks neutrality in a galaxy that permits none. His yellow eyes gleamed. He cannot hide forever. His nature will draw threats to him. Cosmic fragments, Force anomalies, his own internal darkness. And when he can no longer remain isolated, when he must choose, we will be waiting, somewhere in the vast darkness of space. Sentry flew alone with his thoughts and his demon, seeking a place where he could exist without destroying everything he touched. But the void was patient and hungry. And this galaxy had so much to feed on. The moon had no name, at least not in any Imperial database that Sentry could detect. It orbited a gas giant in the outer rim's Tingel arm, far from major hyperspace routes, far from the wars that consumed the inner systems. Rocky, airless, lifeless, perfect. Sentry had been there for 3 standard days, and the isolation was both salvation and torture. He'd hollowed out a cavern in the moon's largest crater, using his strength to excavate chambers deep enough to shield him from cosmic radiation. Not that it could harm him, but the principle of shelter felt important, human. The cavern was Spartan, stone walls he'd smoothed with heat vision, a makeshift meditation space, and a viewport he'd carved that looked out onto the gas giant's swirling storms. No technology, no communication, no distractions, just Sentry and the void, locked in their eternal struggle. And the Force, pressing against his consciousness like water against a dam. He'd thought distance from Coruscant would weaken the sensation, but the opposite proved true. Away from the static of trillions of minds, the Force was clearer, more present. He could feel it flowing through the gas giant's electromagnetic storms, through the distant stars, even through the lifeless rock around him. It was everywhere, inescapable, a cosmic background radiation of consciousness and connection. It didn't touch him, couldn't touch him, but it observed him, analyzed him. And sometimes, in his meditation, Sentry almost felt it, questioning. What are you? Where do you belong? Why do you resist? I don't resist, Sentry said aloud, his voice echoing in the empty cavern. I just exist. That's all I've ever done. Exist and try not to destroy everything. Liar. The void whispered from the shadows. You resist constantly. Resist me. Resist your true nature. Resist the truth that power without purpose is just potential wasted. Power without purpose destroys indiscriminately, Sentry countered, having this argument for the 1000th time. I've seen what happens when beings like us stop caring about consequences. Have you? Or have you just seen what happens when beings like us pretend to be weak? When we chain ourselves with morality and hesitation while others burn? Sentry didn't answer. The void was getting better at these arguments. Stronger, more coherent. 3 days away from civilization should have weakened it. Less fear to feed on, less suffering to sustain it. But the opposite was happening. The darkness was growing more substantial, more independent. He suspected the Force was responsible, not maliciously, but through simple interaction. The Force sought balance, sought to categorize everything in its domain as light or dark. Sentry's presence, something that existed outside that binary, created a vacuum the Force tried to fill. It pushed against his light, which inadvertently fed his darkness. A cosmic feedback loop he didn't know how to break. A sensor alert echoed through the Force, not audible, but perceptible. Someone was approaching the moon. No, multiple someones. Ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Sentry rose from his meditation, golden aura flickering to life as he focused his enhanced senses. 6 ships. Small craft, not military. Sensors that swept the system methodically. They'd found him already. 3 days of isolation. And someone had tracked him to this nameless moon in the middle of nowhere. He considered fleeing. He could reach light speed without a ship, jump to another system, find another rock to hide under. But running would just delay the inevitable. Someone would always find him. The Force made stealth impossible. He burned too brightly in its currents. The ships entered orbit. 5 remained in holding patterns while 1 descended toward his crater. As it approached, Sentry recognized the design, a modified light freighter. Older model, held together with optimism and spare parts. Not Imperial, not obviously rebel either. Independent, perhaps. Smuggler or merchant. The ship landed 100 meters from his cavern entrance. Repulsors kicking up moon dust in a gray fountain. The boarding ramp extended, and 3 figures emerged wearing environment suits. Sentry walked out to meet them, not bothering with protection from the vacuum. His physiology didn't require air, pressure, or any conventional life support. He simply existed, maintained by the cosmic radiation that had created him. The 3 figures stopped dead when they saw him standing casually in hard vacuum. Golden cape streaming. Behind him in a solar wind that should have flash-frozen exposed flesh. The lead figure activated their suit's external speaker. Robert Reynolds? The Sentry. That's me, Sentry confirmed, his voice carrying through vibrations. In the rock beneath their feet sensed sound. Couldn't travel in vacuum. Who are you? And how did you find me? The figure reached up and deactivated their helmet seals. The faceplate retracted, revealing the gray walker from Coruscant, or at least one of them. Up close, Sentry could see they were Miraluka, a near-human species with no eyes, seeing entirely through the Force. We told you we would wait in the spaces between, the gray walker said, somehow breathing vacuum as easily as Sentry did. Forceability, he realized. They were creating a pocket of sustainable atmosphere around themselves. You've spent 3 days wrestling with impossible questions. We thought you might appreciate some answers. I appreciate isolation, Sentry replied, and not being found by people who want to use me. We don't want to use you. A second figure removed their helmet. Human, elderly, with intricate tattoos that seemed to shift and flow across weathered skin. We want to understand you. And we think you want to understand the Force. An exchange of knowledge. Nothing more. The third figure, still helmeted, remained silent. But Sentry felt power radiating from them. Force energy more concentrated than the others. Coiled and controlled with the discipline of decades of training. Why should I trust you? Sentry asked. The last 3 factions that approached me wanted me as either a weapon, a prisoner, or a corpse. What makes you different? Because we've already seen the future where we try to control you. The Miraluka Gray Walker said calmly. Would you like to know how it ends? Sentry's eyes narrowed. The Force shows the future? Possible futures. Probable outcomes. Paths that might be walked. The elderly human gestured toward the ship. We saw 3. In one, we attempt to bind you to our service. You destroy us and 17 star systems in the resulting conflict. In another, we leave you alone. The void consumes you within a month. And what emerges kills billions before the Emperor uses the Death Star on your position, destroying 3 inhabited worlds to contain the threat. And the third? Sentry's voice was very quiet. In the third, we talk. We teach. You learn. And together, we forge something this galaxy has never seen, a balance point between cosmic impossibility and Force tradition. Neither outcome is guaranteed, but it's the only path where both you and the galaxy survive. The void stirred uneasily. Don't trust them. They're manipulating you with visions. The Force can't show the future. It's not sentient, not conscious, just energy. But Sentry remembered what the Miraluka had said on Coruscant. Consciousness is a matter of perspective, and he'd experienced enough cosmic strangeness in his career to know that the line between energy and awareness was blurrier than most realized. What do you want in exchange for this teaching? Sentry asked. Eventually, your help preventing the exact catastrophe we just described. The elderly human's expression was grave. You're not the only cosmic anomaly the Force has sensed. There are others coming. Fragments, as you called them. Pieces of your universe's conflicts leaking into ours. If left unchecked, they'll tear holes in reality that will consume everything. You're uniquely qualified to stop them. But only if you survive long enough. Only if you master the balance. Sentry looked back at his cavern, at the cold stone that had been his refuge for 3 days. Then up at the gas giant, its storms raging with beautiful, mindless fury. He'd come here seeking isolation, seeking time to figure things out alone. But maybe alone was the problem. Maybe isolation just gave the void more room to grow. Fine, he said finally. I'll listen. I'll learn. But the moment I think you're trying to control me, the moment this becomes about your agenda instead of my survival, I'm gone. Clear. Clear, the Miraluka agreed. Now, shall we begin with the most important lesson, which is that you're not as alone as you think. The Force has been carrying messages for you, from those who've watched your struggle and wish to help. The third figure finally removed their helmet, and Sentry's breath caught. It was a Jedi, or former Jedi, based on the scars and the absence of any lightsaber. An older woman, Tigrita species. Her montrals marked with faded paint that spoke of Jedi traditions long abandoned. My name is Ashera Dren, she said, her voice carrying both strength and sorrow. I survived Order 66. Watched my fellow Jedi slaughtered by those they trusted. Spent 20 years hiding, wondering if the Force had abandoned us. She stepped closer to Sentry, studying him with eyes that had seen too much death. Then I felt you arrive. Felt the Force itself pause in confusion and wonder. And I realized something. Maybe the Force didn't abandon us. Maybe it was waiting for something new, something that could break the cycle. I'm not a cycle breaker, Sentry protested. I'm barely keeping myself together. All the greatest catalysts for change begin that way, Ashera said with a slight smile. The force flows around you like water around stone. It cannot move you, cannot change you, but your presence changes its flow. Do you understand what that means? Not really. It means you're the first being in galactic history who the Force must negotiate with rather than command. The Jedi bent to its will. The Sith dominated it through passion. But you? You simply exist, indifferent to its authority. That terrifies some, inspires others, and might be exactly what this galaxy needs. The elderly human gestured back toward the ship. Come, we have much to discuss and limited time before. The Empire realizes where you've gone. Vader is persistent. Sentry hesitated at the threshold, literally and figuratively. Behind him, isolation, safety. The slow descent into madness as the void grew stronger. Before him, unknown allies, uncertain teachings, and the chance that trusting the wrong people would end in catastrophe. Don't go with them, the void urged. Stay here. Just us. No complications. No betrayals. Just pure power and perfect darkness. But staying meant losing. Eventually, inevitably, the void would win in isolation. Sentry needed something to fight for beyond simple survival. Needed purpose. Even if that purpose was just learning to exist without destroying everything. All right, he said, stepping toward the ship. Teach me about this force. Show me how to exist in your galaxy without feeding my darkness. And maybe we can figure out how to stop those fragments before they destroy both our universes. As they boarded the ship and lifted off from the nameless moon, Sentry looked back one last time at his abandoned refuge. Part of him would always want to return there, to hide from the galaxy and its endless complications. But heroes didn't hide, even broken ones, even gods cursed with demons. The ship jumped to hyperspace, and the Grey Walkers began the most important lesson of Sentry's life. How to be powerful without being destructive. How to carry darkness without being consumed. And in the depths of the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine felt Sentry's presence vanish from the Force's accessible currents. The stranger was being hidden, shielded by techniques the Emperor hadn't encountered in decades. So, Palpatine whispered to the darkness. The Grey Walkers reveal themselves at last. Interesting. Lord Vader, it seems we have a hunt before us. Find a stranger. Find those who shelter him. And remind the galaxy that no power exists outside Imperial authority. In hyperspace, surrounded by beings who claim to understand balance, Sentry felt the void stir uneasily. For the first time since arriving in this galaxy, his darkness seemed uncertain, not weakened, but cautious. Because if the Grey Walkers were right, if balance was possible, then the void's victory wasn't inevitable. And that changed everything. The Grey Walkers. Sanctuary existed in a place that shouldn't be possible, a space station. Hidden inside a pocket dimension, accessible only through specific hyperspace coordinates and force techniques that bent reality at the seams. When the ship emerged from the dimensional fold, Sentry's enhanced senses reeled at the impossibility of the architecture. The station was built from asteroids fused with ancient starship hulls. All of it held together not by conventional engineering, but by the Force itself. Towers spiraled in directions that violated Euclidean geometry. Gardens grew in vacuum, sustained by concentrated life energy. And everywhere, Sentry felt the pressure of balanced Force energy. Neither light nor dark, but something perfectly neutral. It was beautiful, and it made the void scream. Get out. Get out. This place is poison to us. They're trying to trap us, cage us, destroy us. Sentry clutched his head as pain lanced through his consciousness. Not physical pain, the void couldn't actually hurt him, but the sensation of his darkness recoiling from the station's balanced energy like a vampire from sunlight. His golden aura flickered wildly, streaks of shadow trying to pull away, to flee back to normal space where suffering and fear could sustain it. Easy, Asheradren said, placing a hand on his shoulder. The touch carried Force energy, calm, centered, deliberately neutral. It didn't suppress the void, but it didn't feed it either. Just acknowledged it. Your darkness fears this place because it cannot feed here. But it cannot be destroyed here either. Balance preserves both light and dark. It just prevents either from dominating. Feels like being torn apart, Sentry gasped, fighting for control. That's because you've spent your entire existence fighting the elderly human who'd introduced himself as master. Zen during the flight explained, light against dark, Sentry against void, sanity against madness. This place doesn't ask you to fight. It asks you to simply be. Both aspects, simultaneously, neither consuming the other. I don't know how to do that, Sentry admitted, his voice raw. Then we'll teach you. The Miraluka, who'd given the name Valera, guided him toward the station's central chamber. But first, you need to understand what you really are. Not what your universe made you, but what you've become through existing. The central chamber was a sphere, perfect, massive, its walls made of crystalline material that seemed to shift between transparency and opacity. At the center, suspended in midair through force levitation, floated a holocron unlike any Sentry had seen in Imperial records or Rebel transmissions. It was gray, its geometric patterns constantly rearranging, and it pulsed with an energy signature that reminded him uncomfortably of his own power. What is that? Sentry asked. A gray holocron, Valera explained, created over centuries by Force users who rejected the binary. It contains knowledge that both Jedi and Sith tried to destroy, teachings about the Force's true nature, about balance not as a destination, but as a constant negotiation between extremes. Master Zen approached the holocron, and it opened in response to his presence. Light poured out, not gold or crimson, but silver gray. And within that light appeared a holographic figure, an ancient being of a species Sentry didn't recognize, with features that seemed to shift between forms as if reality couldn't quite decide what they should look like. Robert Reynolds, the holocron's guardian, spoke, its voice layered with harmonics that suggested multiple consciousnesses speaking as one. The beacon, the convergence, the impossible made manifest. We have waited 3,000 years for your arrival. Sentry blinked. You knew I was coming? 3,000 years ago, the Force showed us, the Guardian confirmed. A vision of a being from beyond, carrying power that exists outside our galaxy's fundamental structure. A living paradox that would force itself to evolve or break. The holographic figure gestured, and images appeared around them, star maps, dimensional charts, equations that blended physics with mysticism. Your universe and ours exist in parallel, separated by dimensional membranes. Those membranes should be impenetrable, but something has damaged them. The cosmic battle you fought, it tore holes. And now the barriers between realities are failing. New images appeared, rifts in space-time, fragments of cosmic energy leaking through, and something worse, shadows that looked disturbingly like the void, multiplying across dimensional boundaries. What am I looking at? Sentry asked, dread coiling in his stomach. The future, Ashera said quietly. If the barriers aren't repaired, your void isn't unique, Sentry. It's a symptom of a larger problem. In your universe, you and your darkness exist in balance because your reality contains you. But here, separated from your home dimension, the void is growing independent, becoming its own entity. And if it fully separates from you, it'll consume this galaxy, Sentry finished, the horrible logic clicking into place. Because it won't be bound by the limitations that kept it connected to me. It'll be pure destruction, unanchored, unlimited. Precisely. Master Zen's expression was grave. In approximately 70 standard days, the void will reach critical independence. After that, nothing in this galaxy can stop it. Not the Emperor, not the Death Star, not even you. Lies, the void screamed in Sentry's mind. They're lying to separate us, to weaken us. I'm part of you. I'll always be part of you. But there was uncertainty in that denial. Fear, even. The void was many things, but it wasn't stupid. It could feel the changes too. The way it grew stronger, not just from feeding, but from simple existence in this galaxy. The way the Force's presence pushed against Sentry, which inadvertently pushed the void further from him. How do I stop it? Sentry demanded. How do I prevent the separation? The Holocron Guardian's form solidified, becoming more distinct. You must learn true balance. Not fighting the darkness, not suppressing it, but acknowledging it as part of yourself while not being defined by it. Light and dark hero and monster, creation and destruction, all existing simultaneously, none dominating. That's impossible, Sentry said. I've tried for years. The void is pure hunger, pure negation. It doesn't want balance. It wants to consume everything. Because you've taught it that's all it can be, Valera said gently. You've spent decades treating it as an enemy, a curse, a disease. What if it's not? What if it's simply the shadow cast by your immense light? Shadows aren't evil, Sentry. They're just the absence of light. Necessary. Natural. Only problematic when we pretend they don't exist. I know my shadow exists, Sentry protested. I've fought it every day of my life. But have you accepted it? Ashera asked. Truly accepted it as part of who you are rather than something to be overcome. Sentry opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. Had he? Every victory over the void had been about suppression, containment, pushing it down and locking it away. He'd never once considered treating it as anything other than an enemy. Never tried to understand why it existed beyond a cosmic accident of radiation and mental illness. The Holocron Guardian seemed to read his thoughts. The void emerged because your power needed balance. You possess the strength of 1,000,000 suns, creative force beyond comprehension. The universe abhors imbalance, so it created equal destructive force. The void is your equilibrium, Sentry, not your enemy, your other half. Yes, the void whispered, and for the first time its voice carried something other than hunger or rage, confusion, wonder. Yes, I am balance. I am necessary. I am part of you. This is why you're here, Master Zen said. This sanctuary exists at perfect balance. No light to strengthen your heroism. No darkness to feed your shadow. Just equilibrium. If you can learn to exist here, truly exist, both aspects in harmony, you'll prevent the separation. You'll become what this galaxy desperately needs. A force that transcends the binary. And if I can't? Sentry asked. Then in 70 days, we all die, Ashera said bluntly. The void will emerge fully independent, and it will consume everything in its path. Planets, stars, the force itself. It will be the heat death of the galaxy compressed into a single, conscious entity. And there is no weapon, no strategy, no force technique that can stop it. Sentry looked around at the gray walkers, these beings who'd rejected the easy certainties of light and dark to walk a harder path. They weren't asking him to be a weapon. We're trying to use him. They were offering him a chance at the one thing he'd wanted since the day cosmic radiation had shattered Robert Reynolds' mind. Peace. How long will the training take? He asked. However long it takes, Valera said. Time moves differently in this pocket dimension. 70 days outside can be 70 years inside if necessary. The force bends around this place, creating temporal flexibility. 70 years. Sentry tried to imagine that. 70 years of meditation, training, learning to accept rather than fight. 70 years of not being a hero, not saving people, not doing anything except confronting his own nature. The void stirred, and its voice was almost hopeful. 70 years of not fighting each other, of trying to understand. Maybe that could work. Before Sentry could respond, alarms shrieked through the station. Not audible, force alarms. Warnings that rippled through every sensitive being's consciousness. Valera's eyeless face turned toward the dimensional barrier, her expression tightening. Impossible, she breathed. Someone's found us. Someone's trying to force entry into the pocket dimension. Who? Sentry demanded. The answer came in the form of a presence that pressed against the dimensional barrier like a blade against flesh. Dark, powerful, infinitely patient, and absolutely relentless. Sentry had felt it before, on Coruscant, in the crater where they'd first met. Vader had found them. How? Master Zen demanded. This sanctuary has existed for centuries. No one outside the Grey Walkers knows its location. The dimensional coordinates are impossible to track. Unless someone tracked us, Ashera said grimly, pulling out a small device from her robes. It was blinking, a tracker, microscopic, planted somewhere during their rescue of Sentry. He used us as bait. Let us lead him here. The dimensional barrier began to crack. Vader's tie advanced, modified with dark side alchemy and Emperor's resources, was tearing through the protective field like paper. Behind him, Sentry felt more ships. Star destroyers. An entire Imperial fleet, waiting just outside the pocket dimension. Impressive, the Holocron Guardian observed. The Dark Lord is more resourceful than anticipated. Can we defend this place? Sentry asked, golden aura already blazing to life. No, Valera said simply. If we fight, we violate the sanctuary's balance. The station will collapse, killing everyone here and releasing your void directly into normal space. Uncontrolled, fully independent. Then what do we do? Ashera looked at him, and her expression held both apology and determination. We do what Grey Walkers always do when balance is threatened. We scatter, preserve the knowledge, survive to teach another day. And me? Sentry asked, though he already knew the answer. You face Vader, Master Zen said. You're the only one who can buy us time to evacuate. The only one whose presence won't destabilize the station further. The dimensional barrier shattered. Vader's tie screamed through the opening, followed by boarding craft filled with stormtroopers and inquisitors, dark side. Force users trained specifically to hunt Jedi survivors. Sentry looked at the Grey Walkers, at the Holocron, at the sanctuary that had offered him hope of balance for the first time in decades. Then he looked at the advancing Imperial forces. Go, he said quietly. I'll handle this. You can't kill them, Valera warned. Any death in this sanctuary will. I know. Sentry's eyes blazed gold. I won't kill anyone. I'll just show them that some fights aren't worth winning. He flew toward the approaching Imperial forces, and the void came with him, not fighting, not separate, but alongside. Still distinct, still dangerous, but for the first time, working together toward a common goal. Survival, understanding, and maybe, if they were very lucky, balance. Vader's tie advanced touched down on the sanctuary's impossible surface. Its landing struts finding purchase on crystalline material that shouldn't exist. The Dark Lord emerged, cape billowing in atmosphere that had no source. Lightsaber already ignited and humming its crimson promise. Behind him, 6 Inquisitors fanned out in a practiced formation, former Jedi, broken and reforged in the Emperor's crucible, their dual-bladed sabers spinning with predatory menace. Robert Reynolds, Vader's mechanical voice echoed across the station. Your isolation ends. The Emperor's patience is exhausted. Come willingly, or be taken. Sentry descended from above, landing between Vader and the sanctuary's central chamber where the Grey Walkers were evacuating. His golden aura blazed, but shadows still streaked through it, the void present. Visible, but contained. For now, you made a mistake coming here, Vader, Sentry said. This place exists in balance. Violence disrupts that balance. If we fight here, everyone dies. Including your Inquisitors. Including you. I am aware of the risk, Vader replied. His respirator breathing its eternal rhythm. The Emperor calculated acceptable losses. This sanctuary represents a threat to Imperial authority. It must be destroyed, and you must be contained. Both objectives justify casualties. One of the Inquisitors, a Twi'lek woman whose Leku were marked with Sith tattoos, laughed darkly. The famous Sentry. I expected someone more impressive. You're just a man with a glowing costume. Let me show her what impressive looks like, the void whispered eagerly. Let me tear her mind apart. Show her fears made manifest. Make her scream until. No, Sentry said aloud. And the word carried such finality that even the Inquisitors hesitated. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here to give you one chance to leave. You presume to give Lord Vader chances? Another Inquisitor, a massive Daludan male, stepped forward with his saber raised. We are Inquisitors of the Empire. We hunt Force sensitives across the galaxy. What makes you think? Sentry moved. Not attacking, simply moving. One moment, he stood 30 meters away. The next, he was directly in front of the Daludan, close enough that the Inquisitor's spinning saber actually touched Sentry's chest and stopped. The plasma blade pressed against Sentry's costume, energy screaming as it tried to cut, but the fabric didn't even scorch. I'm not Force sensitive, Sentry said quietly, staring into the Daludan's widening eyes. Your weapons don't work on me. Your Force techniques can't touch me, and your master knows it, which is why he's standing back while sending you forward to test me. The Inquisitor tried to pull his saber back, but Sentry's hand moved, gentle, almost casual, and closed around the weapon's hilt. The lightsaber's energy flickered, destabilized by proximity to Sentry's cosmic radiation. The Kyber crystal inside screamed in frequencies only Force sensitives could hear, resonating with power it couldn't comprehend. Sentry released the weapon and stepped back. The Inquisitor stumbled away, his confidence shattered, his saber sputtering before stabilizing. Vader's Force presence swelled with dark side energy. Impressive, but you cannot defeat us all without violence. And violence here means mutual destruction. The Emperor predicted this. He calls it acceptable attrition. The question is, do you? Behind Sentry, he felt the Grey Walkers preparing their final evacuation. The holocron was being transferred to an escape ship. Knowledge preserved. But it would take another 2 minutes. 2 minutes he needed to hold the line without killing anyone, without destabilizing the sanctuary, without letting the void loose. 2 minutes that felt like eternity. The Emperor is willing to sacrifice you and 6 Inquisitors just to destroy this place? Sentry asked. That's insane. That is strategy, Vader corrected. This sanctuary trains those who reject Imperial doctrine, who teach balance over absolute loyalty. Every Grey Walker we eliminate strengthens the Empire's ideological dominance. Your death, or capture, is merely a significant bonus. The Inquisitors began circling, coordinating through the Force. Sentry could feel their dark side energy probing at the sanctuary's balance, testing for weaknesses. They were good, trained killers with years of experience hunting, Force users across hostile territory, but they'd never faced anything like him. Last warning, Sentry said, his voice carrying across the station. Leave now. Take your ships. Tell the Emperor I'm not worth this cost. Are you not? Vader tilted his head, studying Sentry through the Force and through his mask's advanced sensors. You possess power beyond comprehension. You carry darkness that could consume galaxies. And you refuse to serve the established order. The Emperor views you as the greatest threat to galactic stability since the Jedi Order. He will spend whatever resources necessary to eliminate that threat. Then he's a fool, Sentry stated flatly. Because I'm not your enemy. I don't want to rule anything. Don't want to destroy anything. I just want to exist without breaking everything I touch. Why can't anyone in this galaxy understand that? Because neutrality is impossible, Vader said. And there was something in his voice, a note of genuine conviction beneath the mechanical monotone. In my experience, those who claim to stand, aside from conflict inevitably, become its greatest casualties, or its greatest catalysts. There is no middle ground. Only victory or defeat. That's the Sith talking. Ashera Dren's voice cut across the standoff. She stood at the entrance to the central chamber, her posture calm, but her Force presence ready for combat. The absolute philosophy, with us or against us, light or dark. The Emperor has taught you well. Lord Vader taught you to forget what Anakin Skywalker once believed. Vader's entire body went rigid. The name, his true name, spoken aloud, sent a ripple through the dark side energy surrounding him. The Inquisitors felt it too, their circular pattern faltering as their master's control wavered. That name, Vader said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, means nothing. Anakin Skywalker died on Mustafar. Only Vader remains. Did he? Ashera stepped forward, and Sentry realized she was buying time for the final evacuations. Or did you bury him because remembering hurt too much? Because admitting you chose wrong? That you destroyed everything you loved for power that enslaves you was too painful to bear? Enough. Vader raised his hand, and the Force coalesced around Ashera with crushing pressure. Not telekinesis, she could resist that, but a compression of dark side energy designed to suffocate, to stop her heart, to kill without visible violence. Sentry intercepted. He didn't know how he did it. The Force couldn't affect him directly, but he felt Vader's attack moving through the space toward Ashera, felt the dark side energy compressing reality itself, and simply stepped into its path, placed his body between the attack and its target. The dark side energy hit Sentry and dissipated like fog against a mountain. Vader's hand trembled. Impossible. You shouldn't be able to intercept Force attacks. They exist partially outside conventional space. Apparently, I exist outside everything, Sentry replied, including your dark side. You can't hurt her while I'm here. Vader can't hurt any of the Grey Walkers. And you can't hurt me. So what's the point of this? For a moment, The Dark Lord stood motionless, his breathing the only sound. Sentry could feel calculations occurring behind that mask, tactical assessments, probability matrices, strategic options. Vader was many things, but he wasn't stupid. He recognized an unwinnable position when he encountered one. Inquisitors, Vader commanded. Fall back to the ships. Prepare orbital bombardment coordinates. Master, the Twi'lek Inquisitors sounded confused. You're abandoning the assault? I am adapting to reality. Vader's mask turned back toward Sentry. If we cannot take the stranger through direct confrontation, we will destroy the sanctuary and force him into open space. There, Star Destroyers wait with enough firepower to glass planets. Let us see if your invulnerability extends to sustained turbo-laser bombardment. You'll kill everyone here, Sentry said. Gray Walkers. Your own Inquisitors if they don't evacuate fast enough. Yourself. Acceptable losses, Vader repeated. The Emperor values results over lives, including mine. And Sentry realized the terrible truth. Vader meant it. The Dark Lord would die here if it meant completing his mission, would sacrifice himself, his Inquisitors, everything in service to Palpatine's commands. Not because he was brainwashed or mindless, but because he'd already lost everything that made life meaningful. Death in service was just another form of existence for someone who died inside decades ago. He's broken, the void observed. And there was something almost pitying in its voice. Like us. But he chose his breaking. Embraced it. Made it his strength. That's not strength, Sentry whispered. That's just surrender wearing armor. Behind him, he felt the final evacuation complete. The Gray Walkers were aboard their ships, preparing dimensional jumps that would scatter them across the galaxy. The holocron was secured, knowledge preserved. But the sanctuary itself, centuries of accumulated balance, a place where light and dark could coexist, was about to be destroyed. Unless Sentry did something they'd explicitly warned him not to do. Vader, Sentry said, his voice carrying desperate urgency. Don't do this. The Emperor is wrong. I'm not a threat to anyone who doesn't threaten me first. Let the Gray Walkers go. Let me go? Tell Palpatine you couldn't find us. That we escaped through dimensional rifts. Anything. Lies, Vader stated flatly. The Emperor does not accept failure. Does not tolerate excuses. I will complete this mission or die trying. There is no alternative. The Dark Lord turned and began walking back toward his tie. Around the station, Star Destroyers were moving into bombardment positions. Turbo-laser batteries were powering up, preparing to pour enough energy into the pocket dimension to collapse it entirely. Sentry felt something crack inside him. Not his will, not his control, but his patience. His desperate hope that this galaxy could be reasoned with, that its conflicts could be solved without more death and destruction. The Void felt it too, and surged forward with eagerness. Yes, finally, show them what happens when you push a god too far. Show them that mercy has limits. No, Sentry said, but his voice wavered. No, I can't. If I lose control here, if I let you out fully, you'll never go back. The separation will complete. Everything the Gray Walkers warned about will happen. Then find another way, the Void hissed. A third option. Not violence. Not surrender. Something they don't expect. Something that proves we're more than just destruction waiting to happen. And suddenly, impossibly, Sentry knew what to do. He flew. Not toward Vader, but away. Toward the dimensional barrier where Imperial ships waited. His golden aura blazed brighter than ever as he positioned himself directly between the sanctuary and the Star Destroyers. Then he expanded his aura, not as an attack, as a shield. His cosmic radiation, the energy that had created him, that sustained him, that existed outside this galaxy's physical laws, spread outward in a golden hemisphere that encompassed the entire sanctuary. It was the largest display of power he'd ever attempted, maintaining a protective field across kilometers of space, holding it against the inevitable bombardment. Fire, Vader commanded from his tie. The Star Destroyers opened fire. Turbo-laser batteries unleashed. Hell, green bolts of superheated plasma that could reduce continents to ash, concentrated on the single point where Sentry floated. The bombardment was relentless, overwhelming, designed to obliterate any target regardless of defenses. Every bolt hit Sentry's shield and evaporated. Inside the sanctuary, The Grey Walkers watched in awe as their impossible student held back an entire Imperial fleet through sheer presence. The golden light was so bright that it illuminated the pocket dimension like a second sun, pushing back shadows, making darkness impossible. And in that light, the void screamed. Not in pain, it couldn't feel pain, but in frustration and, impossibly, in pride. Because Sentry was proving something the void had never considered. That power didn't have to destroy. That strength could protect. That even darkness could exist in service to something greater than hunger. This is stupid, the void muttered. Wasteful. Dramatic. Pointless. Maybe. Sentry agreed through gritted teeth as he held the shield. But it's also right. The bombardment continued for 17 minutes. 17 minutes of sustained turbo-laser fire that would have destroyed a dozen planets. 17 minutes of Sentry holding position, drawing on reserves of power he'd rarely touched. Maintaining a shield that shouldn't exist against weapons that shouldn't be resistible. Finally, the bombardment ceased. Not because the Star Destroyers ran out of ammunition, but because even Vader recognized futility when confronted with it. His TIE approached the shield, hovering just outside its perimeter. Impressive, the Dark Lord admitted through his ship's external speakers. The Emperor was correct. You are beyond conventional containment, beyond conventional threat assessment. A pause, breathing mechanical and eternal. Very well. You have demonstrated your position. The Empire withdraws. For now. Sentry asked, still maintaining the shield despite his exhaustion. The Emperor does not forget, Vader replied. Does not forgive. You will see us again, Robert Reynolds. And next time, we will come prepared for impossibility. The Imperial fleet began withdrawing, jumping to hyperspace in coordinated bursts. Within minutes, the pocket dimension was empty except for the sanctuary, its defenders, and one exhausted god floating in a sea of his own golden light. Sentry collapsed the shield and nearly fell before. Ashera caught him with forced levitation, guiding him back to the station's surface. He landed hard, costume smoking, every molecule in his body screaming from exertion. That, Valera said with obvious admiration, was the most impressive display of nonviolent resistance I have ever witnessed. Was also stupid, Sentry gasped. Could have failed. Could have destabilized the sanctuary anyway. But it didn't, Master Zen said, kneeling beside him. You chose protection over destruction. Maintained balance even when violence seemed inevitable. Do you understand what you just did? Sentry looked up at the Grey Walker Master. I stood my ground. You integrated, Ashera said softly. For 17 minutes, you and the Void worked together toward a common goal. Not fighting each other. Not separate. Together. That's the first step toward true balance. And Sentry realized she was right. During the bombardment, during those desperate minutes of holding the shield, he hadn't been fighting the Void, hadn't been suppressing it or containing it. They'd simply coexisted, light and dark maintaining the same shield, pursuing the same purpose. It hadn't been easy, hadn't been perfect, but it had been possible. Don't get used to it, the Void grumbled. Next time someone threatens us, I'm voting for overwhelming violence. Noted, Sentry said with a weak smile. The sanctuary's alarms suddenly blazed to life again, but different this time. Not warning of attack, warning of dimensional breach. The barrier wasn't being forced open. It was tearing from within, reality itself splitting along fault lines. Through the tear came something that made everyone present freeze in horror. A fragment, larger than the one Sentry had ejected into dimensional void. This one was planet-sized, and it was pulling dozens more fragments behind it like a cosmic train. They were following his energy signature, drawn by the massive display of power he'd just unleashed. And they were falling toward the sanctuary like judgment from an alien god. The fragments burned with impossible fire as they tore through the dimensional barrier. Not one cosmic mass, but dozens, ranging from asteroid size to planet killers, all trailing reality distortion like wounds in space-time itself. They moved with terrible purpose, drawn to Sentry's energy signature the way moths were drawn to flames. And behind them the dimensional membrane was collapsing entirely. No, Sentry breathed, horror flooding through him. No, I led them here. My shield. It was like lighting a beacon across dimensions. I called them here. The sanctuary can't withstand this, Valeris said. Her eyeless face turned toward the approaching doom. Even the forces. Balance can't maintain structural integrity against that many reality-disrupting masses. The station will collapse. The pocket dimension will implode. And those fragments will spill directly into normal space. Master Zen was already calculating trajectories. If they emerge in the Tingel arm, uncontrolled, the entire outer rim will be consumed within weeks. Millions of star systems, billions of lives. Then I'll stop them, Sentry said, rising to his feet despite his exhaustion. His golden aura flickered weakly, still recovering from the shield display. Like I did with the first fragment. I'll push them back through, seal the dimensional breach. You're depleted, Ashera protested. You held off an Imperial fleet for 17 minutes. Your power needs time to regenerate. If you try this now, then I try depleted. Sentry looked at the Grey Walkers. At these people who'd offered him hope of balance. Who'd shown him that light and dark could coexist. You said I had 70 days before the void separated completely. But those fragments aren't going to wait 70 days. They're here now. So either I stop them now, or there's no galaxy left to save. He's right, the void said, and its voice carried uncharacteristic urgency. Those fragments, they're not just cosmic radiation anymore. They've been corrupted, transformed by passing through dimensional barriers, by existing between universes. They're becoming like me. Pure negation, pure hunger. If they reach inhabited space, they'll consume everything. You can sense that? Sentry asked his darkness. I'm part of them. They're part of me. We're all pieces of the same cosmic accident, Robert. The same reality warping event that created us. The difference is you were human before the radiation hit. They're just raw, mindless energy given form and appetite. The Holocron Guardian's projection appeared beside them, summoned by Master Zen. The ancient being studied the approaching fragments with its shifting, impossible features. The void speaks truth. Those masses are not simply cosmic debris. They are your darkness, externalized and multiplied. Fragments of the void that never found a host, never merged with consciousness. They are what you would become if the separation completed. Hunger without restraint, power without purpose. Then how do I stop them? Sentry demanded. You don't, the Guardian replied. You reclaim them. Sentry stared at the holographic figure. What? They are part of you. Part of what you were before you fell into this galaxy. The cosmic battle that brought you here, it shattered not just dimensional barriers, but your own power. You arrived here incomplete. These fragments are the missing pieces. The portions of your cosmic radiation that took longer to fall through the rift. Ashara's eyes widened with understanding. You're saying Sentry has been operating at partial capacity, that these fragments would make him whole. Precisely. The Guardian gestured toward the approaching masses. But reclaiming them means integrating that much raw, unfiltered energy. Means absorbing darkness that has existed without consciousness, without restraint, without any of the balancing elements that made Robert Reynolds more than just a cosmic accident. If he attempts this without proper preparation, without true integration of his existing void, I'll become pure destruction, Sentry finished. I'll lose myself completely, become exactly what Vader and the Emperor fear. Or, Valera said quietly, stepping forward, you become what the Grey Walkers have prepared you to be, a being of perfect balance, light and dark integrated so completely that absorbing more darkness doesn't tip the scales, it just makes the whole stronger. I held a shield for 17 minutes, Sentry protested. That's not integration. That's barely cooperation. It's a start, Master Zen insisted. And it proves the concept is possible. But you need more. You need the technique we've spent centuries perfecting. The meditation that allows light and dark to coexist not through conflict, but through acceptance. How long does that take to learn? For most students? Years. Decades. We have minutes, Sentry said, looking at the approaching fragments. The nearest was already entering the sanctuary's perimeter, its reality warping energies beginning to destabilize the crystalline structures. The Holocron Guardian's form intensified. Then we accelerate. Robert Reynolds, open your mind to me. Accept the knowledge directly. It will be painful, centuries of accumulated wisdom compressed into moments. But it is the only way. Sentry looked at the Grey Walkers, at these strangers who'd risked everything to help him. Then he looked at the fragments, pieces of himself, scattered across dimensions, finally coming home. And he looked inward, at the void, at the darkness that had haunted him for decades. "What do you think?" he asked his shadow. "I think we're out of options," the void replied. "I think we've been fighting each other so long we forgot we're supposed to be the same person. I think. I think I'm tired of being the monster. Maybe integration doesn't mean you suppress me. Maybe it means we both become something new." "Something new," Sentry repeated. Then to the Holocron Guardian. "Do it." The Guardian reached out, not physically, but through the Force, through dimensions of consciousness that human minds weren't designed to perceive. Knowledge poured into Sentry like a flood. 3,000 years of Grey Walker philosophy. Techniques for maintaining balance. Meditations that acknowledged both light and dark as necessary aspects of existence. It felt like his mind was being split open and reassembled simultaneously. Memories that weren't his flooded through consciousness. Ancient Force users learning to walk between extremes. Jedi who'd rejected the Order's dogma. Sith who'd transcended their hunger for power. And countless others who'd recognized that the galaxy's binary was false. Artificial, a limitation imposed by fear rather than reality. And through it all, one truth. Balance is not the absence of conflict. It is conflict resolved through acceptance rather than domination. Sentry screamed as the knowledge integrated, as centuries of accumulated wisdom found purchase in his fractured psyche. The void screamed with him, not in pain but in transformation. They were both changing, reshaping around this new understanding, this new way of existing. When Sentry opened his eyes, they glowed both gold and shadow black. Alternating so rapidly they appeared gray. "I understand," he said. His voice doubled, his own words overlapping with the void's deeper tones, speaking simultaneously in perfect harmony. "I understand what I have to do." He flew toward the fragments, and the void came with him, not as passenger or infection, but as partner. They moved through the sanctuary's atmosphere, through its artificial barriers, into the space where cosmic radiation met dimensional instability. The nearest fragment was the size of a small moon, and it radiated hunger that made conventional dark side energy look tame by comparison. As Sentry approached, it reached for him with tendrils of reality-warping power, trying to consume him, to add him to its mass. Sentry grabbed those tendrils and pulled, not physically, though his strength could have managed it, but conceptually, metaphysically, pulling the fragments. Energy toward himself, not as an external force, but as something that belonged to him. Reclaiming what had been scattered, the fragment resisted. It had existed independently for days now, had grown accustomed to mindless hunger without restraint. But Sentry and the void worked together, light pulling the fragments, energy toward consciousness, while darkness accepted its nature. Without judgment. "You are not evil," they told the fragment in unified voice. "You are not a mistake. You are power without purpose. We give you purpose. We give you home." The fragment dissolved, its cosmic radiation flowing into Sentry like water into a vessel. Power flooded through him, immense, terrible, glorious power that would have shattered his control days ago. But now, integrated with the void, accepting both aspects equally, he contained it, processed it, made it part of the whole rather than fighting it as an invader. "Again," Sentry said, and flew toward the next fragment. One by one, he reclaimed them. Each absorption made him stronger, more complete, restoring the portions of his cosmic power that had been scattered across dimensional boundaries. The Grey Walkers watched in awe as Sentry grew brighter, more substantial, his form beginning to blur the line between physical being and pure energy. But with each fragment absorbed, the risk grew. The accumulated darkness was immense, raw, negation energy that had existed without consciousness, without restraint. The void drank it eagerly, growing stronger, more distinct, and the balance began to tip. "Too much," Sentry gasped as he absorbed the 15th fragment. "It's too much darkness. I can't." "Yes, you can," the void insisted. And now its voice carried something unprecedented. Encouragement. Support. "We can. Together. Not you suppressing me or me consuming you. Both of us, equally, maintaining the center." "How?" Sentry demanded, struggling against the tide of darkness threatening to overwhelm him. "By remembering why you became a hero," the void said. by remembering that every shadow requires light to cast it, by accepting that I exist because you exist, that your immense power needed equally immense restraint, that I am not your curse, I am your balance. And in that moment, Sentry finally understood. The void wasn't a disease or corruption or cosmic accident. It was the universe's response to impossible power, a safety mechanism, a governor that prevented beings of infinite strength from becoming gods without conscience. He was supposed to have both, was designed by cosmic radiation, by universal laws, by the simple physics of balance, to carry both infinite creative force and infinite destructive potential, neither dominating, both existing in perpetual negotiation. I accept you, Sentry said to his darkness. Not as enemy, not as curse, as part of who I am, as necessary as breathing. And I accept you, the void replied. Not as weakness or limitation, as the consciousness that gives my power meaning, as necessary as hunger. They merged, not metaphorically, actually merged. The distinction between Sentry and void dissolved, replaced by something singular yet dual. A being that was simultaneously golden and shadow, creation and destruction, hope and despair, all aspects integrated so completely they became a unified whole. The transformation was visible from the sanctuary. Master Zen watched as Sentry's form shifted, his golden aura now shot through with veins of pure darkness that didn't diminish the light, but somehow enhanced it, made it more complete. The Gray Walker Master smiled. He's done it, Zen whispered. Achieved true integration. He is balance made manifest. Sentry, no longer fighting the void but incorporating it, flew through the remaining fragments with ease. Each absorption strengthened both aspects equally. Each reclamation made him more complete without tipping toward either extreme. When the final fragment dissolved into his being, when the last portion of scattered cosmic radiation found its home, Sentry floated in the center of the pocket dimension and truly saw himself for the first time. He was power beyond measure, yes, but also restraint beyond comprehension. He was creation and destruction, hope and horror, light and shadow, not separate, not fighting, but woven together so completely they formed something greater than either aspect alone. He was the Sentry and the void, and something new that had no name in any language. He was balance. The dimensional barrier, torn and collapsing, began to stabilize. With the fragments reclaimed, with Sentry's power no longer scattered and vulnerable, reality itself seemed to breathe easier. The tears sealed. The barriers between universes reinforced themselves. And the threat of cosmic cascade, fragments multiplying across dimensions, consuming galaxy after galaxy, evaporated like morning fog. Sentry descended back to the sanctuary, landing before the Gray Walkers who had saved him. His appearance had changed subtly. His costume now incorporated shadows into its design, dark patterns that flowed across the gold and blue like living things. His eyes still glowed, but now with colors that shifted between gold and black depending on angle, perspective, need. How do you feel? Ashura asked. Sentry considered the question. Complete. For the first time in decades, I feel complete. The void isn't gone, will never be gone. But it's not separate anymore. Not fighting me. We're just we. The integration succeeded, Valera confirmed, her force senses reading the perfect equilibrium radiating from him. You are the first being in galactic history to achieve true balance without force training. To unite aspects that should destroy each other, but instead make each other whole. So what now? Sentry asked. I'm balanced. The fragments are contained. The dimensional barrier is sealed. What do I do in this galaxy? Master Zen smiled. Whatever you choose. You're not bound by Jedi doctrine or Sith philosophy, not constrained by imperial law or rebel desperation. You are truly free to define your own path. But, the Holocron Guardian added, its projection appearing beside them, your integration has made you something unprecedented, a being of perfect balance in a galaxy defined by extremes. Your mere existence will challenge every certainty, every assumption, every philosophy that divides this galaxy into binary opposites. The Empire will still hunt you, Ashera warned. The Emperor cannot tolerate power he doesn't control, and the rebellion will still seek your aid. Neither side will accept your neutrality easily. Let them try, Sentry said. and his voice carried confidence without arrogance. I held off a fleet. Integrated darkness that should have consumed me. Sealed dimensional rifts that threaten reality itself. I'm not afraid of their politics anymore. What will you do? Valera asked. Sentry looked out through the sanctuary's crystalline walls, toward the stars beyond, toward a galaxy vast and broken and beautiful despite its endless conflicts. He thought about Vader, the fallen Jedi who'd chosen darkness, about the Emperor, who ruled through fear, about the rebels, fighting for freedom with chaos, about the countless beings caught between extremes, forced to choose sides in wars they didn't start. And he thought about what the Grey Walkers had shown him. That balance was possible, that extremes weren't inevitable, that light and dark could coexist. I'm going to be what this galaxy needs but doesn't have, he said finally. Not a hero or a villain, not a Jedi or a Sith, not Imperial or Rebel. I'm going to be the space between. The reminder that there are always more than two choices. That power doesn't have to serve tyranny or chaos. It can just be a guardian of balance. Master Zen said approvingly. Like the Grey Walkers, but stronger. A force that prevents either light or dark from dominating completely. Something like that. Sentry's eyes gleamed with both gold and shadow. The Emperor wants absolute order. The rebellion wants absolute freedom. Both will fail because extremes always fail. But maybe if there's someone standing in the middle, refusing to let either side win completely, this galaxy can find something better than endless war. That's a dangerous path, Ashera warned. You'll make enemies of everyone who benefits from the binary. Both sides will see you as a threat. Good, Sentry said. They should. Because I am a threat to tyranny, to chaos, to the comfortable lie that there are only two ways to be. I'm proof that balance exists. That middle ground is possible, and that scares them more than any weapon. He turned to the Grey Walkers. These teachers who'd given him more than technique, they'd given him understanding. Thank you for the sanctuary, for the knowledge, for showing me that I didn't have to choose between being the Sentry or becoming the Void, that I could be both. You're welcome, Valera said. But remember, integration is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning. You'll still struggle, still face moments where the balance tips. The difference is now you have the tools to maintain it. I know. Sentry looked inward, at the darkness that was now truly part of him rather than something to fight. The Void and I, we still don't agree on everything. Probably never will. But we don't have to. We just have to coexist. To negotiate. To find middle ground. Usually by me proposing overwhelming violence and you suggesting boring alternatives like diplomacy, the Void said in his mind, its tone carrying something that might have been affection. Usually, Sentry agreed with a smile. He rose into the air, preparing to leave the sanctuary, to return to the galaxy and define his place in it. But he paused, looking back at the Grey Walkers one final time. If the Emperor comes for you again, we'll handle it, Master Zen interrupted. The sanctuary can move now that the dimensional barriers are sealed. We'll find new hiding places, continue teaching those who seek balance. And perhaps, if we're fortunate, some of them will achieve what you have. Integration without destruction. Balance without neutrality becoming apathy. Sentry nodded. Then he flew, not toward any specific destination, but simply away, toward the space between stars, toward the freedom to choose. His path without empire or rebellion, or anyone else defining it for him. Behind him, the sanctuary's lights dimmed as the Grey Walkers prepared to relocate. Master Zen watched. Sentry's golden and shadow form disappear into hyperspace and smiled. A new era begins, the old master said. Not of Jedi or Sith, not of empire or rebellion, but of balance. And it starts with one impossible being who refused to accept that extremes were inevitable. Do you think he'll succeed? Ashera asked. That he can really change this galaxy? I think, Valera said. Her eyeless face turned toward the stars, that the Force itself is curious to find out. And when the Force is curious, anything becomes possible. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine felt the disturbance in the Force. Not the chaos he'd expected from centuries. Destruction or capture, but something else. Something balanced. Perfect. Unprecedented. Interesting, he whispered to the darkness. The stranger has evolved. Become something neither light nor dark. Neither ally nor enemy. His yellow eyes gleamed. This changes our calculations significantly. Lord Vader, it seems we face not a threat to be eliminated, but a variable to be managed. And across the galaxy, on a rebel cruiser hidden in an asteroid field, Captain Joram Kess studied sensor reports of unusual cosmic energy signatures, reports of a golden shadow being appearing at Imperial checkpoints and simply passing through, immune to inspection or detention, of entire space battles pausing, when that same being appeared between combatants and refused to let either side win decisively. He's choosing neither, Kess said quietly, not joining the rebellion, not serving the Empire, just existing between them. Is that good or bad for us? His Celestin co-pilot asked. Kess thought about it for a long moment. I honestly don't know, but I think the galaxy is about to find out what happens when power refuses to choose sides. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, Sentry floated alone but not alone. The void, his constant companion, both aspects finally at peace. He looked out at the galaxy, so broken, so beautiful, so desperate for something beyond its endless conflicts, and felt purpose solidify within him. He couldn't save this galaxy, couldn't fix its wars or heal its wounds or force it toward peace. He was one being in a galaxy of trillions, however powerful. But he could be an example, a reminder, a living proof that extremes weren't inevitable, that balance was possible, that power could exist without serving tyranny or chaos. He was the Sentry, the void, and the space between, and that was enough. The galaxy far, far away had never seen anything like Robert Reynolds. In a universe defined by the eternal conflict between light and dark, between the Jedi's serene detachment and the Sith's passionate hunger, he represented something revolutionary, proof that the binary was false, that extremes were choices rather than destinies. The Empire watched him warily, this being who could not be threatened, controlled, or eliminated through conventional means. The Emperor's calculations shifted, adapted, recognized that some forces existed beyond even his considerable reach. Vader, the fallen knight who drowned his light in darkness, saw in Sentry a mirror of what might have been. Balance achieved rather than balance destroyed. The rebellion saw hope and frustration in equal measure. Here was power enough to challenge the Empire directly, yet power that refused to take sides, that stood between conflicts rather than resolving them. They would learn, in time, that some battles couldn't be won through overwhelming force, that true change came through persistence rather than decisive victory. And the Grey Walkers, scattered across the galaxy but bound by their philosophy of balance, recognized that they'd witnessed something unprecedented, the birth of a new kind of Force user, not one who wielded the Force, but one who existed in harmony with its fundamental nature, the balance it constantly sought but rarely achieved. Sentry had arrived in this galaxy as a broken god, fleeing cosmic conflicts he couldn't control, carrying darkness he couldn't suppress. He'd crashed on Coruscant as a beacon of impossible power, attracting factions who saw him as weapon, threat, or salvation. He'd nearly torn himself apart, fighting the very aspect of himself that made him whole, but through fire and integration, through the Grey Walker's wisdom and his own desperate need for peace. He'd achieved what this galaxy considered impossible, perfect balance. Not the absence of conflict, but conflict resolved through acceptance. Not light triumphing over dark or dark consuming light, but both aspects acknowledging each other as necessary. Eternal partners in the cosmic dance. The fragments were sealed, their reality warping energies integrated into his being. The dimensional barriers were reinforced, preventing further cascade. And Robert Reynolds, the Sentry, the void, the being who was simultaneously both and neither, had found his place in a galaxy that didn't know it needed him. He would not be their savior, would not fight their wars or choose their sides, but he would be their reminder, their living proof that extremes weren't destiny, that between Emperor's tyranny and rebellion's chaos existed a third path, balance. And in a galaxy that had forgotten what that word truly meant, his very existence would become a revolution more profound than any Death Star's destruction or Empire's fall. The Force, ancient and vast, observed this new development with what might have been satisfaction. For millennia, it had bound the galaxy, flowing through all living things, creating connections and consequences. But it had never, encountered something like Sentry, power, that existed parallel to its domain, rather than within it. Consciousness that acknowledged its presence without being subject to its will. Perhaps this was what true balance looked like. Not the force's dominion over all things, but coexistence between different forms of power, different ways of being. The force and the Sentry, cosmic radiation and mystical energy, existing together without one subsuming the other. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, perhaps, was exactly what it needed.